Chapter 501, Part 1. Harry, look, I caught it. Ah, here comes another one. Stupid fish. Do you know who is the boss now? As Pietro's excited voice came, Harry, who had been watching from a distance, finally couldn't hold back anymore. He put down the firewood in his hand and looked frequently in the direction of Pietro. A full hour has passed since the other party entered the water. During this time, the originally empty water tank was gradually filled with big fish caught by Pietro. About every 5 minutes, a fish was successfully caught by him. Seeing the harvest in the other person's hands, Harry was also a little surprised. Although he was speechless about Pietro's ingenious fishing method, Harry had to admit that the other party's fishing skills were indeed excellent, but he could successfully catch more than 10 fish in such a short time. Such efficiency, it also far exceeded his expectations. Looking at the full scene in the water tank, Harry's eyes flashed with joy. There is no doubt that with these praise, even if they just eat these fish tonight, it will be enough for them to fill their stomachs. This fishing operation can be considered a successful conclusion now. Looking at his side again, after more than an hour of collecting, he now had almost 31 pieces of firewood in his hand. So Harry also thought about setting off to return and shouted loudly towards the stream. Pietro, it's almost time. We should go back. Wait until I catch the last fish. Pietro's voice rang out, and upon hearing this, Harry didn't say anything more and just waited quietly. A few more minutes passed, and suddenly, Pietro's urgent voice sounded. Harry, come help. What's wrong? Harry was startled and quickly ran in the direction of Pietro. When he rushed to the water, he finally saw clearly what was happening on the water. On the water surface at this moment, Pietro was holding a giant fish with a length of about 70 centimeters and a weight of about dozens of kilograms. It also brought huge amounts of power to it, constantly feeding on Pietro. Luo Huai was struggling, trying to break away from the other party's restraints. What a big fish! Harry's eyes widened, and he exclaimed, Don't be stunned. Come and help. Pietro struggled to hold the big fish in his hand. His face turned red, and he had obviously exhausted all his strength. What do you want me to do? Harry responded loudly. The situation was now very clear. Looking at the big fish in Pietro's hands, Harry was obviously interested. He didn't want to let go of the prey in front of him in vain. He rubbed his palms nervously, and his heart instantly became nervous. Go find me a stick. Pietro's ferocious voice sounded. Just knock it out, and it'll be fine. Harry reacted instantly, and without saying a word, turned back to the open space behind him and searched for a while. Finally, he seemed to have found something. His eyes lit up, and he quickly stepped forward, picked up a wooden stick as thick as an arm on the ground, and waited. After a while, he nodded with satisfaction. After taking advantage of the guy, Harry immediately turned around and ran in the direction of Pietro. Found it! Arriving at the boulder, Harry was about to throw the wooden stick in his hand to Pietro, but at this moment, he suddenly slipped and fell head first towards the water. Attracted by the movement on Harry's side, Pietro turned his head and his face darkened immediately. Harry, what's going on over there? As soon as he finished speaking, Harry suddenly struggled to surface. His hands kept flopping in the water and shouted, Help me, Pietro, I can't swim. *T. Upon hearing this, Pietro's expression changed, and without thinking, he immediately planned to drop the prey in his hands and go to save people. However, at this moment, the big fish in his hand suddenly struggled more violently. The moment he let go of his hands, it suddenly jumped up from the water, swung its tail, and came towards his face. Down! After receiving this heavy blow, Pietro suddenly felt dizzy, with ghosts appearing in his vision. His body was swaying, and he was struggling to float on the water, but there was no possibility of setting off for rescue. At this moment, Harry, who could not swim, was also taken away from the shore by the long stick he had just brought from the ground, and quickly floated towards the lower reaches of the stream. What was even more unlucky was that during this process, the big fish that had just escaped from Pietro's hand also came to Harry. With a sharp swing, it knocked the long stick supporting Harry several meters away. Using a long stick as a support, Harry finally could no longer float on the water and struggled to sink towards the water. Pietro! After being awakened by Harry's exclamation, Pietro reacted suddenly and quickly turned his head to look at the source of the sound. However, when he saw the distance between the two sides, which was about tens of meters, Pietro's heart sank, and his face suddenly became more anxious. With such a long distance, no matter how good his swimming skills were, it would still take him a few minutes to reach his destination, but they were in the water now. With Harry's water skills, it was not unknown whether he would be able to survive until he rescued them. Seeing Harry's current situation, Pietro became more anxious than ever before. Suddenly, at this critical moment, Pietro's body shook, and the power originally hidden in his body was once again stimulated, acting on his whole body in an instant. Almost subconsciously, Pietro's body began to vibrate at a speed visible to the naked eye, and a steady stream of power emerged from his body. Feeling the power in his body, Pietro reached his heart and began to swing his arms violently. Then, his two arms instantly turned into two afterimages, paddling crazily on the water. 353 at such a swinging speed. Pietro's speed surged, drawing a long white line on the water, quickly approaching Harry's direction. In just a few seconds, before Harry could sink completely into the water, Pietro crossed a distance of tens of meters and came to his side. Catching him with one hand, relying on the swing of his legs, Pietro broke through the water in front of him like a sharp arrow and quickly approached the shore. Back on the shore, Harry collapsed on the ground, breathing the air around him with difficulty, his face full of joy. After a while, when he finally calmed down, he seemed to have thought of something, turned to look at where Pietro was, his face moved, and he asked with surprise, "Pietro, what was that just now? I saw that you seemed—" Pietro stood there, silent for a moment, then smiled and said, "Didn't you guess it all? As you can see, Harry, I'm sorry for not telling you, but I'm actually a mutant." After hearing the other party's answer, Harry stood up silently and came to Pietro. Facing Pietro's somewhat complicated expression, Harry suddenly reached out and grabbed his shoulders, his eyes sparkling, looking at him with envy. "So, that was super ability just now, right? Man, that's really true. Very cool." Seeing Harry's reaction, Pietro blinked in confusion, his eyes filled with confusion. Chapter 502, Part 1. Etc. Pietro quickly interrupted. "Harry, did you make a mistake? I'm a mutant. Aren't you afraid?" "Huh." Harry raised his eyebrows and looked at him with a puzzled expression. "What are you talking about? What about mutant? We are friends, aren't we? And you saved my life just now. How could I have any objection to you?" After slapping Pietro on the shoulder hard, Harry looked at him seriously and said seriously, "But I can assure you, Pietro, I will keep your identity secret for you. We will find a suitable time later and tell Peter and Chen. Believe me, they are all good people and will not treat you badly. What do you think of your identity, Pietro?" Ahem. Pietro coughed a few times awkwardly and stammered, "Well, yes, you're right." Seeing his reaction, Harry frowned, feeling that things were not that simple. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the other party in disbelief. Could they have known about it a long time ago, right? The time gradually returned to the evening. After several hours of busy work, Chen Luo had already finished processing all the ingredients he had brought. With a handful of them, a ray of fire appeared from his hand and fell on the firewood collected beside him. In an instant, set it on fire. Just when Chen Luo was about to start cooking, a rustling sound sounded from a distance, and then the figures of Wanda and others gradually emerged from the darkness. "Came back." Chen Luo didn't look back. "How are you collecting things? I've been waiting for you for a long time." "List!" A shout rang out, and Harry quickly came to Chen Luo, staring at him without blinking, with dissatisfaction written on his face. "You and Peter have known about Wanda and the others for a long time, right? Why didn't you tell us? Don't you believe us?" Chen Luo paused, stood up slowly, and looked at Wanda and Wanda behind Harry, his eyes flickering. "Your abilities are all awakening?" Wanda and Pietro looked at each other and nodded in unison, with some uneasiness on their faces. "Mr. Chen Luo, we—" Pietro was about to explain, but was interrupted by Chen Luo with a wave of his hand. "It's okay. You don't have to explain this." Chen Luo looked at the two of them with a smile and comforted. "After all, this is not something you can control, is it? Besides, Gwen and the others are good kids, so it doesn't matter if I tell them the truth." Hearing this, Wanda immediately relaxed. After comforting the two of them, Chen Luo looked at Harry and Gwen again and said softly, "Harry, Gwen, you are also good children. I definitely believe in you. However, these secrets are still a bit heavy for you, and letting you know may not be a good thing. So I can only choose to hide them." Chen Luo's words are definitely not just words. After all, with their current status, although one is a top student and the other is the child of the leader of the Osborne group, this is only compared to ordinary people. If they're like an extraordinary group like Mutant, in comparison, it is still a bit insignificant. Coupled with the relationship between Wanda and Chen Luo, if they were to know their secrets, it is conceivable that their world will definitely change dramatically in the future. As for whether this change is good or bad for them, even Chen Luo is not sure. After hearing Chen Luo's explanation, Harry, who was originally angry, gradually calmed down. After thinking about it carefully, he understood that Chen Luo's approach was actually a kind of protection for them. Although he wanted to understand this, he was still a little unconvinced and said, "Even if that's the case, Chen, wouldn't you be in any danger? Just like Peter. Aren't you an ordinary person?" Psst. Behind him, Pietro couldn't help laughing. Hearing the movement behind him, Harry turned his head in confusion and looked at the other person. "What, Pietro? Is there something wrong with what I said?" No. How could it be?" Pietro was about to say something, but after seeing Chen Luo's gesture behind him, he shook his head repeatedly and said seriously, "You are right. I have no objection. Beside Pietro, Gwen also noticed his reaction just now. She turned her eyes and looked in the direction of Chen Luo, somewhat thoughtfully. On the other side, Chen Luo was also about to say something, but just as he was speaking, a deafening loud noise suddenly came. The ground trembled slightly. Even the mountaintop where they were standing was affected. Harry and the others swayed and fell to the ground. What's wrong? What happened? He turned around in a panic and looked around. The next moment, Pietro seemed to have discovered something. He looked behind Chen Luo, and his eyes gradually widened. What is that? Behind Chen Luo, a dazzling fire rose up. Along with the sound of fierce artillery fire, the mountain was hit one after another, shaking continuously, attracting everyone's attention. That direction is not good. On the other side, Peter thought for a moment, as if he thought of something. His face changed. He looked in the direction of Chen Luo and said loudly, Chen, that's the direction where Bumblebee and the others are. Chen Luo said nothing, turned around, looked at the fire in front of him, thought for a moment, and said, Wanda Pietro, I'll leave that to you. Just take this opportunity to try your ability. Regarding what happened at the foot of the mountain, Chen Luo naturally perceived it immediately. Although he had not confirmed it on the spot, since the Hornet did not send a signal for help, there would be no problem. As for the purpose of this group of people coming here, Chen Luo was not interested in confirming it. Since they dared to come, he didn't mind giving them a ride. It just so happened that Wanda and the others' abilities had just awakened at this time. It would also be good for them to participate in an actual battle. With their abilities and Bumblebee taking care of them, it might not take long for them to successfully solve it. After hearing what Chen Luo said, Pietro, who had been eager to give it a try, immediately nodded and agreed. Leave it to us, Wanda. But unlike Pietro, who looked excited, beside Wanda, Gwen looked at her friend with some worry and hesitated to speak. Don't worry, Gwen, Wanda comforted softly. It'll be okay. Then be careful yourself. After saying goodbye to everyone, Pietro stepped forward and took Wanda with him. With a movement of his feet, the two disappeared in an instant. Staring blankly at the place where the two people disappeared, Harry stood up from the ground in a daze, unable to regain his composure for a long time. Chapter 503, Part 1. List. After a long silence, Harry finally looked at Chen Luo and said worriedly, What's going to happen to them? Don't worry. At this time, Peter's voice sounded from behind, came to Gwen and the others, and comforted softly. The Hornets are out there, they'll be fine. Bumblebee? The two of them were stunned and looked at him blankly. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you. Peter remembered at this moment, patted his forehead, and then explained to the two of them. What did you say? Bumblebee is a robot. After listening to Peter's explanation, the two of them opened their eyes wide again, with surprise written on their faces. Now that Wanda's secret has been known to the two of them, it also means that Harry and the others have truly come into contact with the other side of the world. Since Chen Luo has no intention of stopping it, Peter does not intend to continue to hide the existence of Bumblebee and simply tell the truth. Told them. After listening to Peter's explanation, Harry came back to his senses, seemed to remember something. His body shook, and a trace of excitement flashed on his face. Wait a minute. The robot can also shape-shift. I remembered it. In the big battle that took place in New York some time ago, the Wasp was one of those robots. That's right. As the son of Norman Osborn, Harry 920 obviously knew something about the battle more than a month ago, although the videos of that battle were specially processed. Just like Chen Luo, because he didn't want to show his face in front of the world, the pictures released were covered with a thick layer of mosaics, and this is why Harry and the others never discovered Chen Luo's true identity. But for Autobots like Optimus Prime and others, Chen Luo did not process their pictures. First of all, they're different from Chen Luo and others. Their unique body structure alone cannot be blocked by mosaic, unless they want it's possible to erase them all from the picture. Secondly, it is also considering Optimus Prime's special status as an alien. This alien invasion obviously shocked the world greatly, and because the scale of the invasion was so huge, this time the high-level officials were unable to completely block the news of shape-shifting King Kong like Optimus Prime and the others did when they came to Earth. After receiving the news of alien invasion, the entire world was panicked by the threat of alien life in the universe. At this time, alien life such as Autobots, who are close to humans, naturally have room for high-level performance. As long as humans understand that not all alien life in this universe is hostile to humans and the Earth, it will undoubtedly be a great comfort to humans, Bab, and it can also greatly reduce people's panic. It will be of considerable benefit to each country's next actions. Definitely, on this point, the senior leaders of the Joint Conference entrusted Fury to talk to Chen Luo. As a collaborator of the Autobots on Earth, and also the main contributor in the New York War, the most important thing is that through this battle, they have thoroughly understood the strength of Chen Luo, which they absolutely cannot provoke now. Exists, so it is natural to obtain Chen Luo's consent before taking action. There was nothing to stop Chen Luo from doing this, and their action would also be beneficial to Optimus Prime and their future lives on Earth. So he simply agreed directly. It is also worth mentioning that in addition to the Autobots, there is also the existence of King Kong. Chen Luo also asked Rhodes to reveal some information. After all, Chen Luo is not sure whether King Kong will appear again in the future. It would be nice to get people used to it in advance. Finally, in this war, in addition to the appearance of Chen Luo and the Blood Clan forces under his command, the existence of Tony, Steve, Thor, and others also spread throughout the world with the spread of the video, which became popular all over the world in a very short time. For a time, the name Avengers was known to countless people. Seeing that Chen Luo and the others did not raise any objections, Harry immediately confirmed Bumblebee's identity. After understanding that the other party was actually a participant in the New York War, Harry suddenly became extremely excited, and his original worries about the battle at the foot of the mountain were instantly gone. And Faye regained his confidence again. Since Bumblebee, a member of the Avengers, was here, Harry didn't think there would be any problems. After all, with his status, he naturally knows more details about the original battle, and he is well aware of how powerful the members of the Avengers are. Facing the nearly 1 million alien army, the battle in the universe was not known to the world. It was a terrifying force that could conquer the Earth. Even the Avengers could wipe them all out. Harry didn't believe it. The enemies that appear this time can reach the level of the former, so there will naturally be no problem in dealing with them. Seeing Harry's sudden expression of confidence, and then looking at Chen Luo and Peter, standing there motionless with no worried expressions on their faces, Gwen's originally worried heart finally relaxed, and she breathed a sigh of relief. His face gradually returned to calm. "Let's wait here," Chen Luo said while packing up the ingredients in his hands. "Wanda and the others should be back in a while." Seeing Chen Luo's actions, Peter and Gwen hurriedly stepped forward to help and started working together. Although Harry wanted to see the battle at the foot of the mountain, after thinking about it, he gave up the plan, shook his head, and started participate silently. Just when Chen Luo and the others were preparing for today's dinner, they only spent a few seconds at the edge of the dense forest at the foot of the mountain. Pietro appears here with Wanda. Hiding behind the huge amounts of tree trunks in front, the two of them looked nervously in the direction of the battlefield. About less than 100 meters away from the two of them, on the winding and narrow road ahead, I saw a pair of heavily armed soldiers scattered everywhere, facing the huge amounts of figures in front of them. "Keep attacking." A steady stream of tongues of fire emerged from the muzzle, shooting at Bumblebee, who returned to his Autobot form. However, Bumblebee at the moment has been remodeled by Tony. The original steel material on the body has been dismantled and replaced with the same alloy material as Tony's steel battle suit. Not to mention their attacks, it was very difficult for even some ordinary missiles to break through the body's defense. Therefore, facing the hail of bullets all around, Bumblebee remained unscathed and strode forward. While advancing, Bumblebee kept moving, and the energy cannon in his hand continued to blast around. Violent explosions sounded, and the vehicles approaching from all around turned into huge amounts of fireballs, instantly lighting up the night sky. Even the soldiers beside these vehicles were swallowed into the sea of fire in the blink of an eye by the explosion beside them. They only had time to let out a shrill scream, and then quickly disappeared without a sound. If it continues at this speed, I am afraid that within a few minutes, the power of Bumblebee alone will be enough to wipe out all these people. Seeing this, Pietro, who was still a little eager to try, suddenly became a little listless and whispered, "In this case, it seems we don't need our help." Wanda didn't answer, silently watching the battle ahead, her body tense, not daring to relax even for a moment. Suddenly, Wanda seemed to see something, and her face changed suddenly. "Bumblebee, watch out, boom." Chapter 504, Part 1. Just behind Bumblebee, Wanda could clearly see that in an inconspicuous-looking black vehicle, a soldier suddenly got out of the vehicle carrying a personal rocket launcher, pointed it in the direction of Bumblebee, and immediately pulled the trigger. The next moment, accompanied by a dazzling fire, a small missile shot out of the barrel in an instant, dragging a long tail flame in the air and shooting straight towards the target. Because the attack came so fast, even with Wanda warning from a distance, Bumblebee still didn't react and was instantly hit by the missile. Accompanied by a loud noise, a huge amount of fireball rose from the Bumblebee's position, and then an arm made of steel fell heavily from the Bumblebee and hit the ground. Although he could not completely avoid it, Bumblebee also made a dodge when the missile came, barely avoiding the fatal part like the chest, causing the missile to fall on the connection between the right shoulder and the arm. Under the huge lethality of the missile, even the armor made of super alloy could not defend it. It exploded instantly, tearing Bumblebee's right arm apart, and its combat power was suddenly reduced sharply. Seeing this, the parts gathered around Bumblebee moved again, and dense firelight emerged from the darkness and shrouded Bumblebee. While suppressing Bumblebee with firepower, Wanda's call just now obviously attracted the attention of those people. A small team of about 20 people separated from the main force and headed in the direction of Wanda and the two of them. Go! Seeing this scene, Pietro's expression changed. His original excitement suddenly subsided a lot, and he became more serious about these people. But this is not surprising. After all, what happened to the bumblebee just now was right before our eyes. Pietro believed that although his speed was very fast, with his physical strength, there was still a huge amount of gap compared with the former. However, he was hit by those missiles. If he was hit, even if he was hit by an ordinary bullet, his fate would probably not be much better. Pietro, Wanda's voice sounded beside her. I'll cover you. Let's get rid of these people first, and then go help Bumblebee. Be careful. Don't get hit. Clear. Pietro nodded, looking forward without blinking, his body tense and ready. Wanda took a deep breath. Her eyes flashed red, and the power in her body instantly surged out, turning into a dark red mist that enveloped the small army in front. Seeing the abnormal situation in front of them, the small unit was panicked for a while, but they quickly came to their senses, raised their guns, and started shooting without hesitation. However, ordinary gun attacks cannot break through the constraints of Wanda ability. As soon as they come into contact with the fog in front of them, the bullets ejected from the muzzle are entangled in the fog in front of them, and the power dissipates, leaving only bullet heads embedded in the fog. In the red mist, it looked extremely strange. At this moment, Pietro, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately started taking action. As soon as his feet moved, the next moment, the world in front of Pietro instantly became much slower. When he ran all the way in front of these people, they still didn't notice Pietro's existence. His movements were slow, and he looked a little sluggish. It looked like each humanoid tree is of age. After using his own ability, although he has just awakened his own ability, Pietro's speed at this moment cannot be underestimated. He has already reached the speed of sound. Compared with the speed of ordinary people, there is a gap of more than 30 times. With such a terrifying speed gap, these people were unable to detect Pietro's movements at all. Before they could even react, they felt a light touch on their hands, and the original weapon in their hands was instantly released and disappeared. It stands to reason that with Pietro's speed, it would only take a face-to-face effort to deal with these people, but he was just a kid who had just gained ability, and he obviously couldn't bear to kill people, so he just used the weapons in their hands. After taking it away, there will be no next step. The same goes for Wanda. After seeing that the weapons in these people's hands disappeared, and there was no longer a threat, she waved her hands, and the mist instantly enveloped everyone. The next moment, these people rolled their eyes and all fell to the ground unconscious. Just after the two men successfully dealt with this force, those who besieged Bumblebee on the other side also noticed the movement here, and the originally orderly lineup suddenly became a bit chaotic. The call came from afar. Please give me flowers. Attention. Attention. Mutant traces found here. There are 2 targets in total. One of them has the variant ability of super speed movement. The other has an unknown ability. It is estimated that he can release red mist and may have the hypnotic ability effect. The information about Wanda and the two was quickly uploaded, and through the unique communication equipment, reached the ears of a middle-aged man 100 miles away from this hill, not far from Xavier's school. Colonel Stryker, preliminary judgment is that the variant abilities of the 2 targets have high practicality. Are they to be captured? Approved, but I'm afraid you can't deal with the target's ability. Stryker paused, a light flashed in his eyes, and said in a deep voice, "Let experimental subject X-13 be dispatched. Deal with the Autobot as quickly as possible, and then capture the 2 mutants." Receive. After receiving Stryker's order, at the edge of the battlefield, the commander-in-chief of this force immediately began to issue new instructions. Release experimental subject X-13. The troops shrink and leave the Autobots to the experimental subject to deal with. Yes. As the order was given, immediately after, at the edge of the battlefield, there was a minivan hidden in the night. Suddenly, there was a vibration from the car body, and the door of the carriage slowly opened, revealing the interior. Inside the carriage, a sealed instrument that seemed to be wrapped in thick steel emerged. Then a heavily armed soldier entered the carriage, entered the password on the floating dial in the center of the instrument, and then pressed the open button. With a heavy metal sound, a gap suddenly opened in the steel wall in the center of the instrument. The steel wall, which was about half a meter thick, slowly opened from both sides, revealing the figure sealed inside. The figure seemed to be over 2 meters tall with muscles all over his body. He wore a pair of military green trousers on his lower body, and his upper body was naked, with strong muscles exposed in the air. He wore a heavy helmet made of steel on his head, and his limbs and the neck was tightly bound by 5 steel rings and remained motionless. Experimental Subject X-13, it's your turn. Chapter 505, Part 1. Click. Following the soldier's operation, The steel rings that originally restrained the movement of the strong man in front of him also began to shrink and quickly disappeared into the wall behind. Without the restraints of these rings, the strong man finally regained his freedom and jumped off the instrument that originally trapped him. Just as soon as it made contact with the car body under its feet, the next moment the car body suddenly shook violently, and the tires were instantly pushed down. The whole car seemed unable to withstand the sudden pressure, and the car body creaked and was teetering. Trying hard to maintain the stability of his body, looking at the strong man in front of him, a trace of fear flashed in the soldier's eyes. X-13 experimental subject, in order from Colonel Stryker. Our current targets are the Autobot codenamed Bumblebee and 2 mutants. The Autobots are free to handle it, but those 2 mutants need to be captured. After saying 740, the soldier didn't say another word. He swallowed nervously, tensed his body, and stood there motionless, as if he was afraid of being stared at by the other party. But fortunately, the other party didn't pay too much attention to him. After listening to the order from Stryker, the strong man's chest rose and fell. 2 visible white vapors spurted out from his nostrils, and his originally somewhat dead eyes gradually gushed out. A red light and a dull thunderous sound came from inside the carriage. Juggernaut attack. The next moment, accompanied by a roar of huge amounts, the strong man moved his feet, instantly knocking a big hole into the car in front of him, and his body fell to the ground. The ground trembled slightly, and then he started running in the direction of Bumblebee. At first, his speed was not very fast, and there was even a certain gap compared with ordinary people. However, as the running continued, his speed gradually became faster and faster, as if there was an inexplicable force pouring into his body. The body and body muscles swelled again, and the whole person seemed to turn into a human-shaped hill, rushing all the way towards the destination. Normally, in a stationary state, experimental subject X-13, also a juggernaut, does not pose any threat, but once he is started, he will turn into a real humanoid tank, and almost no one can stop it. When he really activates, even if a big mountain blocks his way, with his strength, he can smash through it head-on without any damage to his body. The reason why he has such power is actually related to the special ability he has obtained. But unlike what others think, Juggernaut's power is actually related to a special universe from the multi-universe, the Crimson Universe. The original Juggernaut was actually just an ordinary person, but in an accident, he accidentally came to the temple dedicated to the ruler of the Crimson Universe, the evil god Ceterak. After coming into contact with the ruby condensed by the power of Ceterak, the Juggernaut was born. With the blessing of Ceterak's divine power, Juggernaut even possesses various abilities such as super strength, super speed, biological force field, rapid self-healing. Once he is fully activated, with Juggernaut's power, it will be even more powerful, able to fight against demigod-level powerhouses. Just like Hulk's ability to become more powerful as he gets more angry, to a certain extent, Juggernaut and Hulk are similar. Although they are not strong at the demigod level, they still have the ability to fight against demigods. Possible, but even a being like Juggernaut, because he is not really a demigod or even a god, has his own weakness, that is, he does not have enough means to defend against attacks on the soul. It was precisely because of his weakness that Stryker was able to successfully control him and make him obey his orders. However, due to the influence of the evil god's power in Juggernaut's body, Stryker has to make it quiet again after every action, and then make a series of arrangements to control it for a long time. The longer the opponent is allowed to act, then the more likely he is to break free, which is why Stryker usually seals Juggernaut into that special instrument. Although there is a risk of losing control, judging from the content of today's operation, Stryker doesn't think it will take much time. In addition, he is also very interested in Wanda's abilities, and Bumblebee must deal with it as soon as possible. That's why we decisively issued the order to release Juggernaut. After all, the real target of their operation was not here, and this battle came out of the blue. Because they knew that Bumblebee and the Academy's gang of mutants had participated in that battle before. In order to prevent the news from leaking, Trek had to choose to deal with it. Bumblebee takes action. Since you choose to take action, you must fight quickly. Everything was going well originally, but with the appearance of Wanda and the others, something suddenly changed on the battlefield. In order to prevent the movement here from being noticed by the college, not only the situation here must be solved as soon as possible, but also Stryker had to speed up its actions at this moment, taking advantage of the cover of night and heading towards the college. Rumble. With Juggernaut's actions, the earth rumbled under the influence of huge amounts of power. As the ground shook, despite the cover of night, the movement here was still noticed by Wanda and the others. What is that? Wanda controlled the red mist to float in the direction of Bumblebee, while looking in the direction of Juggernaut. Her face was solemn. Although she hasn't seen what happened over there at this moment in Wanda's heart, she suddenly felt an extremely heavy sense of oppression, as if a prehistoric beast was attacking them, trying to wipe out everything in front of them. Destroy. Pietro. Give it to me. Pietro instantly understood what Wanda meant, moved his feet, and disappeared instantly. With a speed comparable to the speed of sound, Pietro arrived beside the running juggernaut in just a few seconds. Looking at the opponent's burly figure like a hill, as he continued to accelerate, the juggernaut's speed has now reached about 100 kilometers per hour. Although there is still a huge amount of gap compared with Pietro's speed, but with the opponent's the body shape looks even more unstoppable. And this is indeed the case. Pietro could clearly see that even though there was a boulder in front of him that was about 12.2 people tall blocking the way, Juggernaut had no intention of stopping and ran straight into it. With a loud noise, the boulder was instantly broken into countless pieces by him and scattered in all directions. However, Juggernaut did not suffer any damage, and instead of stopping, he ran faster towards the battlefield. Seeing this scene, Pietro's eyes twitched, and his expression suddenly changed. Although it felt very tricky, after thinking for a moment, Pietro decisively started his attempt. There is no doubt that the giant in front of him is different from ordinary people. Just looking at the destructive power it showed, just now is far beyond ordinary people. So this time Pietro did not hold back and quickly ran to the place where he had discarded his weapon. Position, took a submachine gun, and returned to the opponent. Pointing the gun in the direction of the juggernaut, Pietro pulled the trigger without hesitation. Chapter 506, Part 1. Violent fire emerged from the muzzle of the gun, but when the hail of bullets hit Juggernaut, it did not even break through the defense on his body and slid feebly to the ground along his skin. Feeling the movement coming from his side, Juggernaut froze, plowing a long ravine in the ground, stopped, slowly turned his head, and looked in the direction of Pietro. Looking at the other party's wild eyes and the visible white air jets ejected from the other party's mouth and nose, Pietro's scalp suddenly became numb and his heart tightened. I said, "This is all a misunderstanding. Do you believe it?" Pietro pulled the corner of his mouth with difficulty and said with a dry smile, "Juggernaut, field strike." Juggernaut paid no attention to Pietro's explanation. He moved his feet and immediately rushed towards Pietro's direction. *T. Seeing this scene, Pietro's face turned green. Without thinking, his body turned into an afterimage and disappeared in an instant. Da-da-da! Violent flames emerged from all directions. Relying on his overwhelming speed, Pietro quickly surrounded Juggernaut and fired continuously to attract the opponent's attack, hoping to spread the pressure on Wanda's side. And his approach also paid off. Under Pietro's entanglement, Juggernaut became more and more violent. At the same time, he also spent most of his energy on finding Pietro, and he could no longer take care of Wanda. While Juggernaut was entangled, on the other side, after Wanda joined the battle, using her ability and the force of Bumblebee to suppress them, even though their opponents were dozens of times more numerous than them, they were quickly defeated. Downwind. Based on the observation just now, Wanda is very clear that the ordinary soldiers surrounding Bumblebee can hardly harm it. The only thing that can threaten Bumblebee is the missile attack hidden in the dark. Wanting to understand this, Wanda decisively spent all her energy on guarding against attacks in this area. On the one hand, she used ability to put a protective shield on her body to avoid being attacked by stray bullets. On the other hand, Wanda kept observing her surroundings, trying to determine the missile's position. Because it was awakening ability just now, although Wanda's ability is already quite powerful at this moment, the coverage range is only about 10 meters at most and cannot be spread further, so she wants to rely on her own ability to find hidden places on the battlefield. The goals are still somewhat inexperienced. It is precisely because of the limitations of her own ability that Wanda has to defend herself in place. As long as she waits for heavy firepower like missiles to appear, she can take action immediately to block it. But because she had to guard against these heavy firepowers, Wanda had no time to take care of the ordinary soldiers and could only leave them to Bumblebee. Bumblebee also understood this and protected Wanda behind him. Bumblebee used his only remaining arm to fight back. Although the damage caused was not as good as before, relying on his own strong defense, he was able to persevere for a while. Boom! The next moment, a missile was launched from the night, trailing a long tail flame and blasting rapidly in the direction of Bumblebee. However, before it approached, Wanda's eyes suddenly lit up. With a wave of her hands, a large piece of red mist rose into the sky, shrouding the missile in the sky. Blocked by this red mist, there was a loud sound of huge amounts of roaring. The sky suddenly lit up with a dazzling fire, illuminating the entire nearby night sky in an instant. The shock wave visible to the naked eye spread in all directions, but because of the red mist blocking it, Bumblebee behind him was still not affected in any way. On the contrary, as the shock wave spread, the soldiers behind Bumblebee were also affected one after another, and they subconsciously raised their arms. Block the sand and dust kicked up by shockwave in front of you. Precisely because of their actions, the firepower behind Bumblebee instantly weakened a lot. As the firepower suddenly weakened, Bumblebee also successfully seized the opportunity. The faint blue light continued to emerge in his hands, and energy cannons blasted towards the vehicles in front. Huge amounts of explosions sounded, and the dazzling fire bloomed, instantly covering the front. The originally tight and orderly lineup exploded into chaos. Damn it! He embarrassedly avoided the explosion of the vehicle next to him, raised his head, and looked at the two figures, one large and one small, in front of him. The commander of this unit had a ferocious look on his face, holding the walkie-talkie in his hand tightly, and roared loudly. "Where's Juggernaut? Where is he now? Why hasn't he shown up yet? Sir, Juggernaut is trapped by another mutant. Fu *K. Team P3, follow my orders. Aim in the direction of Juggernaut, and launch an attack. Sir!" An exclamation came from the walkie-talkie. The other party wanted to say something, but was interrupted. "Shut up. Don't say so much now. Follow my orders." "Yes, sir." The next moment, as the coordinates of Juggernaut came in simultaneously, the special team hidden at the edge of the battlefield also began to adjust parameters silently. Then, as the top of the carriage slowly opened, a missile was loaded in the carriage. The automatic tracking missile was launched instantly and flew in the direction of Juggernaut. "That's not good." Looking at the missile flying rapidly in the sky, Wanda's expression changed. As if she thought of something, she turned to look in the direction of Pietro. On the other side of the battlefield, Pietro, who was pestering Juggernaut in front of 543 to prevent him from supporting the battlefield, suddenly felt a tremor in his heart. He subconsciously looked up at the sky. When he saw the thing flying rapidly in the sky, Pietro's pupils flashed. Shrinking, without even thinking, he immediately dodged and retreated into the distance. Relying on his own speed, which was comparable to the speed of sound, Pietro arrived hundreds of meters away before the missile actually fell, avoiding the missile's attack range. But at this moment, Juggernaut was not so lucky. He was far inferior to Pietro in terms of speed. Before he could even react, a missile was approaching. The next second, the bullet hit him hard in the body. Boom! A deafening loud noise came, and a ball of huge amounts of flame shot up into the sky. A terrifying shockwave swept across all directions, lifting up a thick layer of soil on the ground under your feet, which then quickly cracked and decomposed under the high temperature and dissipated. Feeling the slightly trembling ground under his feet, and looking at the huge fireball in the distance that was more than 10 meters in size, Pietro was secretly thankful, and at the same time, he breathed a sigh of relief. Such an explosion, even that big guy just now, shouldn't be possible. What the few *K. The next moment, as the fire light dissipated, and when Pietro saw the scene inside clearly, his mouth opened wide, and his eyes were full of disbelief. Chapter 507, Part 1. As the flames gradually dissipated, Pietro could faintly see a figure still standing in it, looming. "That's impossible, right?" Seeing this, Pietro's mouth began to twitch slightly, and he murmured, "You bugs, Juggernaut is going to crush you all." Suddenly, a huge amount of roaring sound came from the flame. Huge amounts of sound seemed to turn into substance, forming ripples visible to the naked eye that spread in all directions. As the ripples passed, the flames were instantly shattered and turned into countless tiny sparks floating in the air, and then quickly silence fell. The ground gradually began to tremble, and the huge amount of figure in the distance slowly stepped forward. White airflow visible to the naked eye spurted out from its mouth and nose. The muscles of the body swelled again, and the skin was faintly red. It looked like an angry humanoid bull, and ran wildly towards the battlefield. And just as Juggernaut started to act again, with the blessing of the divine power in his body, his speed gradually increased, and the power contained in his body began to become more and more violent. With each step, a huge visible to the naked eye appeared on the ground. Footprints, an indestructible terrifying aura spread out, as if it was going to smash everything in front of it. Seeing this, Pietro finally recovered from the shock, reacted suddenly, his face changed, and he quickly chased after him. In just a few seconds, due to the absolute speed gap, Pietro successfully caught up with Juggernaut. At the same time, he kept moving, pulling the trigger, and pouring countless bullets towards the opponent again. However, facing Pietro's harassing attack, Juggernaut at this moment no longer wanted to be affected by him as before. He stared at the battlefield ahead with red eyes, speeding straight towards the target without slowing down at all. "Sir, experimental subject X-13 has resumed action." After hearing the news from the walkie-talkie, the commander immediately ordered the troops around him to open a gap and let Juggernaut in without saying a word. At the same time, his side also slowly retreated at the same time to avoid being affected by the subsequent battle. When he ordered the attack on Juggernaut's location, he had already thought clearly that with the power of this missile, it would never be able to cause harm to Juggernaut. And he also knew that Pietro, who was fighting with Juggernaut, had the ability to move at super speed. If Juggernaut focused on the opponent with the power shown by Bumblebee, and the other mutant, even if they could persist for a while time, may not end in failure in the end. So in this case, they definitely need the support of Juggernaut. After this missile came down, it would be great if Pietro could be solved smoothly. But if he could not be solved, the real purpose of his decision was to make the opponent leave Juggernaut. As long as the missile hits the direction of Juggernaut, the enraged Juggernaut will inevitably rush here as fast as possible. Even if Pietro harasses Kasumi again, it will probably be of no avail. After all, they have all seen how terrifying Juggernaut is in this state. In this state, even their commander, Colonel Stryker, dare not stay by his side, otherwise there is a risk of being torn to pieces at any time. After completely falling into the rage state, the only thought in Juggernaut's mind at the moment was destruction. Coupled with his terrifying ability, according to the evaluation of relevant departments, the power Juggernaut can explode in this state is even comparable to Hulk. Is the absolute top combat power on Earth. At this time, Juggernaut is just like Hulk in rage. After his anger has not been completely vented, even Stryker cannot control it. He can only wait until it is vented and completely restored to calm before he can be controlled by them again. Take control. So when he issued this order, he had already thought about it. As long as Juggernaut and Bumblebee were fighting, he would order the rest of the soldiers to start retreating to make enough space for the battlefield in front of him, thus completely releasing the full power of Juggernaut. While giving the order to retreat, the commander looked at the figures of Bumblebee and the others in front of them, as well as the hill behind them. Thinking of Juggernaut's terrifying power, he could already imagine their fate. In his opinion, not only the Bumblebee and the two mutants, but even the hill could not escape the destruction of the Juggernaut and would be destroyed by it. What a pity for those two mutants. Thinking of this, light flashed in his eyes and he shook his head helplessly. Although he has only been in contact with her for a short moment, he already has a clear understanding of the difficulties in Wanda's ability. With their current strength, if the factor of Juggernaut is removed, facing these two people and Bumblebee teaming up, it will definitely be a disastrous defeat, so it is conceivable how difficult it is to capture these two mutants. Even with the existence of Juggernaut, they don't dare to stay around each other too much, let alone cooperate with him to arrest him, given his personality that could go berserk at any time. So when he decided to send Juggernaut out, he had already made the decision to give up these two precious mutant materials. After all, these two mutants are just their unexpected gains. Their operation needs to be highly confidential. In order to prevent others from discovering it, they must fight quickly. Once discovered, especially the members of the Avengers, then their fate is hard to say. Just as the commander ordered the other soldiers to retreat, after running hundreds of meters, Juggernaut finally approached Wanda and the two. Crush you. Huge amounts of roaring sounded. Wanda's heart was shocked, and she subconsciously turned her head to look. Watch out. Wanda, Bumblebee run. Pietro suddenly appeared in front of the two of them and said anxiously. Just now, he saw with his own eyes the horror of Juggernaut. Even though he has a speed comparable to the speed of sound, he is still helpless in the face of such a replica of Hulk. Seeing the huge figure running in their direction, Bumblebee fired an energy cannon instantly without saying a word and hit the opponent. However, as this energy cannon hit Juggernaut's body, the blue energy light, nods, that was the size of a basketball file, was instantly smashed into pieces by Juggernaut. Countless energies scattered in all directions and turned into countless tiny rays. Energy lightning scattered around, blasting tiny holes into the ground. After crushing Bumblebee's attack head-on, Juggernaut kept speeding and turned his body into a humanoid cannonball. Even Wanda's full-strength barrier was completely unstoppable. It broke through instantly and then hit the Bumblebee in front of him. A powerful force burst out, and a huge amount of mechanical leg was instantly disconnected from the waist, falling powerlessly. After losing one of his right legs, Bumblebee finally couldn't hold on any longer and fell to the ground, raising large amounts of smoke and dust. Boom! After breaking one of Bumblebee's legs, Juggernaut didn't have time to stop before he crashed into the hill in front of him, instantly creating a dark, human-shaped hole and disappearing. When the smoke and dust fell, Wanda and Pietro stood beside Bumblebee. Looking at the deep pit behind them, their faces changed and fear flashed in their eyes. Chapter 508, Part 1. Pietro was okay. After all, he had already seen the horror of Juggernaut just now, but Wanda was different. This was the first time she saw someone able to break through her defense in an instant. That mountain does damage. Such destructive power brought a heavy pressure to her heart. Wanda, what should we do? Pietro looked at the deep pit behind him with a solemn expression, not daring to be careless at all. You go deal with the others first, and leave this to me. Although it was only a moment of contact, Wanda could already realize how difficult and terrifying Juggernaut was. With the opponent's indestructible body, Pietro could not do much harm to him, no matter how fast he was. It was better to deal with other people like this. It can also greatly reduce their strength. Quick leave! The opponent is probably a level 4 or above mutant. You will not be his opponent. Behind the two of them, Bumblebee's intermittent voice sounded. After being attacked by missiles and juggernauts one after another, Bumblebee at the moment has been severely damaged. After missing an arm and a leg, he can't even stand now. Blue light flashes in his eyes, and sparks appear on the injured parts of his body. Splatter. Wanda didn't even look back. She nodded slightly to Pietro and gave a knowing gesture. Pietro instantly understood what she meant, nodded silently, and disappeared instantly without saying a word. The next moment, Pietro turned into an afterimage and ran wildly in the direction of the gradually retreating troops. With Pietro's speed far exceeding that of ordinary people, before they could even react, the weapons in these people's hands disappeared in an instant as Pietro passed by. And after losing their weapons, these people could no longer react. Unable to resist, they were all knocked unconscious by Pietro, their eyes darkened, and they fell to the ground. As for the battlefield on Pietro's side, Wanda had no time to take care of it. At this moment, she was highly nervous and looked ahead without blinking, preparing for the next wave of attacks from the opponent. She didn't let her wait long as a rumble sounded, and a tall figure jumped out of the pothole in front of her. It rushed all the way, smashing the pothole into pieces. It was filled with smoke and dust, and its speed did not slow down as it ran towards Wanda's direction. Come. Seeing this, Wanda had a thought in her mind, and a large piece of red mist poured out, completely submerging into the land in front of her. Then, just as Juggernaut was less than a few meters in front of her, Wanda waved her hands and went all out, and all the land about 1 meter thick in front of her was lifted up by her, like a sheet made of soil. The carpet instantly wrapped the Juggernaut above it, and drove the Juggernaut heavily towards the mountain behind him. Boom! There was another loud noise. After being hit by Wanda in the front, Juggernaut turned into a human-shaped cannonball and flew backwards nearly 100 meters in an instant, crashing into the mountainside and disappearing without wind. Wiping the sweat on her head, Wanda took a few deep breaths, waited until her strength recovered a little, then turned her head and used her ability to cover Bumblebee again. Let's leave first. The situation is now obvious. Bumblebee is no longer suitable to continue participating in the war in his current state. Moreover, Wanda knows that with Juggernaut's defense, her attack just now may not cause any harm to it. Once the opponent returns, the situation must be more dangerous than now. So no matter what, she must take the lead in ensuring Bumblebee's safety. Bumblebee, can you still shapeshift? Bumblebee nodded, and then there was a sudden metallic sound from all parts of the body. Huge amounts of body quickly shrank and transformed back into Chevrolet form again. The only difference from before is that the two doors on the current Hornet's body have disappeared, along with the tires under the doors. Nearly half of the entire body has been damaged. Obviously, there is no possibility of further action. Seeing this, Wanda didn't say much, gritted her teeth, activated her ability again, and wanted to take the Auto-Wasp away from here. However, Wanda's ability has only just awakened not long ago, and more than half of it has been consumed in the previous battles. It is undoubtedly unrealistic to want to leave with Bumblebee's multi-ton body. She worked hard for a long time, and the red mist wrapped around the car trembled violently. Finally, she was able to move the car less than 1 meter. However, even the short distance of less than 1 meter had already exhausted her remaining strength. A lot was consumed again, and as her power was nearly exhausted, Wanda's face turned pale and she collapsed to the ground instantly. Wanda! Bumblebee's body shook. Get out of here quickly! No! Wanda held onto the car and stood up with difficulty. She shook her head stubbornly and looked straight ahead. The strands of red slowly gathered from her palms. Boom! Before Bumblebee could say anything more, the next moment, a roar of huge amounts of sound echoed through the night sky. Then, the mountain in front began to shake violently, and large rocks rolled down the mountain, as if some unknown entity was hitting the mountain, to destroy it completely. Enough! A familiar voice sounded. Then, a scarlet blood light shot up into the sky, exploded violently in the sky, and turned into countless densely packed tiny light spots, all of which poured towards the mountain below. The next moment, as a rich bloody torrent poured out from the mountain finally stopped shaking and became calm again. At the same time, in the sky above the mountain, a big bloody hand held Juggernaut tightly in its palm, and countless bloody divine powers turned into chains, wrapping Juggernaut and restraining the opponent's movements. Under Chen Luo's strong suppression, Juggernaut's resistance became smaller and smaller. Finally, when he completely regained his composure, the power of the evil god that had been boiling in his body fell silent again. Without being able to move his body, Juggernaut cannot exert its own ability characteristics, and there is no possibility of escaping from Chen Luo. On another battlefield at the foot of the mountain, looking at the familiar bloody light in the sky and the juggernaut, who was instantly suppressed by this bloody light. The commander's pupils at the edge of the battlefield suddenly contracted violently, as if he thought of something, and there was fear in his eyes. Color flashed. He quickly picked up the walkie-talkie in his hand and said with a panicked expression, "Quick retreat. An accident occurred during the mission, Blood God, and God is here." Before he finished speaking, the next moment, a gust of wind passed by him. As Pietro's figure gradually emerged in the air, everyone on the battlefield, including the commander just now, had been successfully captured. He solves it. Chapter 509, Part 1. Turning around and looking behind him, Pietro scratched his head in confusion. What did he seem to be saying just now? Forget it, it probably doesn't matter. But this doubt only lasted for a moment, and was then forgotten by Pietro. After all, he had more important things to do now. Although these people were solved, they were just ordinary people, and compared to the Juggernaut just now, there is a huge gap. When he thought that Wanda was the only one resisting Juggernaut, Pietro suddenly felt anxious and immediately turned around, planning to rush in the direction of Wanda. I don't know if there is anything going on with Wanda. What is that? However, before he could move, the bloody light that appeared over the distant mountain instantly attracted his attention. He subconsciously raised his head and looked at the bloody light, and then a familiar figure faintly emerged from the light. That's no way. Pietro's eyes widened instantly, and he finally reacted. As if he thought of something, he moved his feet and ran forward quickly. The next moment, when Pietro appeared again, he was already at Wang Tian's side. Just as he stopped and turned around staggeringly, looking at Wanda, Pietro asked uncertainly, "Wanda, is that?" "It's Chen." Looking at the top of the mountain, a smile bloomed on Wanda's face, and some color appeared on her originally pale face again. "That's true." Upon hearing this answer, Pietro breathed a sigh of relief, and his tense heart relaxed. They had known about Chen Luo's strength more than a month ago. Although they had not seen the previous battle because they were hiding in the basement, they also learned a lot about that tragic battle on TV afterwards. Deep understanding. Although Chen Luo at that time did not show his true identity like Tony and others, in the eyes of those who were familiar with Chen Luo, his identity could not be concealed. The same goes for Wanda and the others. After all, they all know Tony and others, and even by simple elimination, they can guess Chen Luo's true identity. As the video of the original battle spread all over the world, while Tony and the Avengers became famous, Chen Luo's fame also soared at a rocket speed, becoming popular all over the world in a very short period of time, even with Tony. Compared with the first superhero in modern times, he is not far behind. There is no other reason. In fact, Chen Luo's performance in that battle was too eye-catching. It is not an exaggeration to say that he single-handedly defeated the Chitauri army. In that battle that attracted worldwide attention, Chen Luo's performance, his overwhelming strength, not only shocked the whole world, but also made countless people crazily worship him. As Chen Luo's reputation spread, gradually, and I don't know when a nickname referring to Chen Luo came out, and it quickly gained recognition from countless people. Blood God. Judging from the power shown by Chen Luo in the video, the iconic bloody light is simply his unique mark. In addition, Chen Luo's blood clan origin and his god's divine attributes are very suitable for this nickname. So even friends like Tony agreed, and the nickname spread naturally. Looking at the big bloody hand in the night sky, Wanda and the others were completely relaxed at this moment, and no longer had the sense of urgency they had just now. Although they have already experienced the awesomeness of Juggernaut's strength, they have absolute confidence in Chen Luo's strength. After all, he can defeat most of the alien army with his own strength. Juggernaut is facing such an existence, and it is impossible to cause any trouble. After completely relaxing, Wanda seemed to have thought of something. Looking at the damaged Bumblebee behind her, she turned to Pietro and said, "Pietro, you should go back and tell Chen what happened here. Bumblebee needs help now." "I see." Pietro nodded and immediately ran towards the top of the mountain without saying a word. At the same time, in the open space above the mountaintop, the air at this moment suddenly became extremely silent. Looking up at the sky blankly, Harry opened his mouth subconsciously, his eyes filled with confusion. Finally, when he came to his senses slightly, he looked at Chen Luo with eyes still filled with shock, and he stammered and said, "Chen, are you Blood God?" Hearing this, Chen Luo retracted his gaze, looked in the direction of Harry, and smiled faintly. "It's really you." Seeing Chen Luo's reaction, Harry finally confirmed what he was thinking. After a brief shock, it was replaced by excitement. "Shit, I actually know the famous Blood God. This is so crazy." He never expected that Chen Luo, who had been getting along with him day and night, would be the superhero who is now popular all over the world. Thinking of all the scenes of them getting along in the past, Harry was a little confused for a moment. The same goes for Gwen on the other side. "Zero, please give me flowers." She stared blankly at Chen Luo for a while, then turned to look in the direction of Peter. Seeing the unsurprised look on the other person's face, Gwen instantly understood that Chen Luo's identity was probably no longer a secret in Peter's eyes. Recalling Peter's low-key behavior in school in the past, even though there was a big shot like Chen Luo at home, he didn't show any thoughts at all. Compared with the high-profile students in school, there was a huge amount of difference. Thinking of this, Gwen's eyes when she looked at Peter suddenly softened a bit, and her affection for Peter in her heart also rose to a new level unconsciously. But Peter still knew nothing about this. Looking at the bound figure in the sky, Peter asked curiously, "Chen, what are you going to do with that big guy? Let's talk about this later. Now, we have more important things to deal with." Chen Luo turned his head and looked at a deserted corner. Then, with a strong wind passing by, Pietro's figure instantly appeared in front of everyone. "Chen, Bumblebee." As soon as he appeared, Pietro quickly told Chen Luo everything that happened at the foot of the mountain. After listening to his story, Chen Luo looked down the mountain, was silent for a moment, and said, "It seems like it's really lively tonight. I don't know what the purpose of those people coming here is." Pietro was stunned for a moment, then seemed to remember something, and said quickly, "I seem to have met a person just now. It seems that he should be the boss of these people. If we ask him, we should be able to know something." Chen Luo nodded. "In this case, that person will be left to you. Take him to the bottom of the mountain. I will wait for you there." After saying that, Chen Luo waved his hand to the others behind him, indicating that they should wait here, and then with a thought, he disappeared in an instant. Seeing this, Pietro did not stay here, and disappeared again as a strong wind passed by. Seeing the two people disappearing in the blink of an eye, Peter and the three of them looked at each other, returned to their original positions silently, and began to wait. The next moment, the air in front of Wanda suddenly fluctuated, and then Chen Luo emerged from the air instantly. "Chen, you're here." Wanda's eyes lit up, and she quickly stepped forward to greet him. "Bumblebee, don't worry." Chen Luo looked behind Wanda and nodded. "Leave the rest to me." Wanda was sure, and after nodding, she stayed where she was, silently looking at Chen Luo's back. Chapter 510, Part 1. Arriving in front of Bumblebee and looking at the scars on his body, Chen Luo stretched out his hand to touch the car body in front of him. A cold look flashed in his eyes. "Thank you for your hard work, old man. Wait a little longer, and you will recover soon." With that said, Chen Luo let Bumblebee return to the shape-shifting King Kong form, and then waved his right hand, and the two steel limbs that fell in the distance flew over instantly. Under Chen Luo's control, put them on Bumblebee, respectively. Injured parts of the body. After doing all this, Chen Luo flipped his palm, and the source of fire appeared instantly. With a thought, layers of ripples like running water slowly appeared on the surface of the fire source, and the metal covering the surface slowly opened outwards, revealing the hidden core. The core of the light bloomed, forming a beam of light visible to the naked eye and shining on Bumblebee. Under the light of the fire source, Bumblebee's originally broken limb, 050, began to vibrate slightly and grew together with the end of Bumblebee's wound. Countless thin metal wires come out and are connected to each other. Under the connection of these thin metal wires, the limbs slowly moved closer to the wound and finally completely merged into one and returned to their original shape. At the same time, the metal on the Bumblebee's body also showed layers of ripples just like the source of fire. The metal swam on the body's surface like flowing water. As the ripples dissipated, the originally pitted surface took on a new look and regained its luster. Newborn. As the light from the fire source dissipated, Bumblebee immediately returned to full health, jumped up, stood on the ground again, and looked at his body. The fully recovered Bumblebee also regained its vitality, not at all as lifeless as before. Appearance. Seeing the Bumblebee jumping around behind Chen Luo, Wanda felt relieved. A smile appeared on her face, and her eyes looked at Chen Luo with an inexplicable light. Before she could speak, the next moment, an afterimage appeared in front of the two of them. As a strong wind blew by, Pietro's figure also appeared in front of the two of them. "People brought it." Holding the unconscious figure in his hand, Pietro said quickly, not even seeing Wanda's faint eyes behind him. Hearing this, Chen Luo turned around and looked at the man in Pietro's hand, his eyes shining with light. After thinking for a moment, Chen Luo nodded. "Thank you for your hard work. Leave the rest to me." Instructing the other party to put the person on the ground, Chen Luo waved his hand, and a bloody light instantly surged out of his hand and disappeared into the other person's body. As the light disappeared, the figure suddenly shook his body, and then slowly opened his eyes. "Tell me your name." Looking at the figure who had achieved hypnotic ability by him, Chen Luo said, "John Moser." "Your position, and why are you here?" Affiliated to Special Force. Before he finished speaking, the next moment, the man named John suddenly let out a scream. His face was ferocious, his eyes bulged, as if he had seen something terrifying, Blood flowed out from the 7 orifices, leaving traces of blood, and then he rolled his eyes and instantly collapsed to the ground. Seeing this scene, both Wanda and Wanda were shocked and hurriedly stepped forward to check each other's physical condition. After discovering that the other party had no vital signs at all, the two of them were at a loss and subconsciously looked in the direction of Chen Luo. Seeing the opponent's figure lying on the ground, Chen Luo's eyes flashed with light, as if he thought of something, and his expression instantly changed. Wanda, Pietro. Looking at the two of them, Chen Luo's face darkened. You go find Peter and the others now. Cancel today's camping. Bumblebee will take you back after we go down the mountain. I'll leave this to you first. I have other things to deal with. Hearing this, Wanda was stunned for a second and quickly asked, Chen, what happened? Chen Luo, maybe there was an accident at the college. I want to go back there and have a look first. Although John didn't finish what he said just now. After hearing that the other party's target was Xavier's school and the name of the unit to which the other party belonged, Chen Luo was shocked and suddenly reacted. If his memory is correct, there seems to have been an attack on District College in the original timeline. The person who planned this attack was none other than Colonel Stryker, who had always hated mutants and wanted to completely erase them from the world. If it was really as he thought, it was the other party who planned tonight's action, then according to the original development, the professor should now. Thinking of this, Chen Luo no longer had any hesitation. After leaving the matter here to Wanda, Chen Luo disappeared immediately, taking Juggernaut, who was still firmly bound by him. Looking at the position where Chen Luo left, Wanda glanced around, looking at the unconscious people lying on the ground. Her face darkened, and she quickly told Pietro, Pietro, hurry up the mountain now and bring Peter and the others down. Let's go now. Now that Chen Luo has left, and they have consumed a lot of energy in the previous battle, if these people wake up again, their situation will be in danger. And now there is likely to be danger at Xavier's school, and Chen Luo has already set out to deal with it. If there is a problem here, they will be holding Chen Luo back. Such a situation is not what she originally intended to see. So the best choice now is to evacuate as quickly as possible. As long as they are safe, it will be the best help to Chen Luo. Although Pietro did not think as much as Wanda, he did not question his sister's words at all. He nodded quickly, moved his feet, and ran towards the top of the mountain with all his strength. It only took less than half a minute for the three of them to be moved to the foot of the mountain by Pietro. Vomit. However, because Pietro was too fast, the three people who had just arrived at the foot of the mountain couldn't bear it for a while. They bent over and retched for a long time before they finally recovered. Wanda, what happened on 3.4? Are we leaving now? Gwen looked at each other blankly. There's no time to explain now. Wanda took a deep breath, her face serious. Let's leave first and wait until we're in a safe place. Seeing Wanda's solemn expression, the three of them were shocked. Without asking any more questions, they nodded, quickly opened the car door, got in the car and got in. Boom! Accompanied by a burst of huge amounts of engine roar, the Hornet ejected instantly, raising smoke and dust in the sky, and headed back. Just as Wanda and her party left, on the other side, Chen Luo also arrived at their destination. But when he arrived at the gate of Xavier's school, Chen Luo's heart sank when he saw the scene in the school. Chapter 511, Part 1. The college at this moment is completely different from what Chen Luo remembered. The steel fence in front of the gate has turned into a ball of scrap metal, hanging powerlessly to one side. A huge amount of groove can be seen on it, as if it was directly knocked open by something. Walking into the gate, nearly half of the originally lush grove was on fire, and the formerly lively park now became completely silent. On the gravel-covered path, from time to time, you can see dark figures lying on the ground. Judging from the equipment they are wearing, they are as simple and heavy as the troops Wanda and the others fought with before. Looking at the long-lost figures on the ground, Chen Luo frowned and continued to walk forward. What gave him some comfort was that along the way, apart from the soldiers who invaded the college, no students in the college were seen. At least so far, there should be no casualties among the people in the college. But if you think about it carefully, if this attack was really done by Stryker, then this situation is understandable. According to the opponent's usual practice, even if he encounters other mutants, his first choice is to capture them and then transport them to the laboratory for research. Compared with meaningless massacres in such a venue, it is better to make the best use of everything and contribute your life on the operating table, which is a more meaningful approach. What's more, these students in the college are all carefully selected by professors from all over the world. Their abilities can be said to have considerable research value, so Stryker has no reason to let go. Once he catches the students in the college, he would definitely be reluctant to kill it directly, but would choose to take it back to the base for research. Thinking of this, Chen Luo's tense expression softened slightly, and he continued to walk forward without stopping. Soon, when Chen Luo arrived in front of the college teaching building, the entire teaching building was covered in fire, forming a huge amount of fireball in the night, with thick smoke billowing, which was particularly eye-catching. Through perception, After Chen Luo discovered that there was no life in the building, with a thought, a rich blood light burst out of the body and turned into a huge amount of blood-colored light shield, wrapping the entire building. Wrapped in this blood-colored light shield, soon, when the oxygen in the shield was exhausted, the raging fire in the building finally had no support and slowly dissipated and extinguished. Immediately afterwards, Chen Luo followed suit and covered all the dormitories where students and teachers lived next to them. After a while, the flames in these buildings were completely extinguished. As the blood light dissipated, the appearance of these buildings became pitch black and dilapidated. The building was exposed to the air and was crumbling, as if it was about to collapse at any time. Passing through these buildings in turn, according to Chen Luo's perception, there is indeed no life in these buildings, even in the underground base of the teaching building. Finally, when Chen Luo came to the open space in front of the teaching building, he used teleportation, passed through the ground below, and came to the huge amount of lifting platform underground. Looking at the empty scene around him, Chen Luo's eyes flashed, and he felt in his heart suddenly, I had an idea. He took out his phone and immediately dialed Qin's number. After a while, as expected, the call was immediately connected and Qin's voice rang. List, Qin, where are you now? I'm with Aurora now, on the way to Ohio. The professor there found a child with great potential, and we plan to bring him back. Hearing this answer, Chen Luo sighed. That's true. Just as he thought, if there were instructors like Qin and others in the academy, Striker's ability shouldn't be able to break in directly and cause such huge amounts of damage to the place. The reason for this idea is that where Chen Luo is standing now, there should have been a display of the Blackbird fighter jet developed by Hank. However, now that the fighter jet has disappeared and there are no traces of damage around it, then the fact is self-evident. It is only possible that someone took the fighter plane away from the academy and went elsewhere. Thinking of this, Chen Luo then continued to ask, Qin, do you know who else was in the college after you and Aurora left? Professor? Scott? Are they all here? Yes, they're all in the college. By the way, there is also Logan. He also came to the college 2 days ago. He seems to have something to ask the professor. Speaking of this, Qin seemed to have heard something. Hurriedly asked, Chun, are you also there at the college now? Did something happen there? That's right. Chen Luo thought for a while and decided to tell the truth. The college was attacked tonight. All the mutants, including the professor, have disappeared. I think they were caught. What? Qin's exclamation came, and then he said without hesitation, We are coming back now, Chun, and you go look around to see if anyone else is there. That's right. 3 kilometers away from the east side of the college, there is a hidden secret passage that can lead directly to the college dormitory. If someone escapes, they are probably there. I understand. I'll go there and have a look. Now that he heard the exact direction, Chen Luo naturally had no reason not to go. He hung up the phone and appeared in the sky above the college in a flash. Huge amounts of wings spread out, and as the wings flapped, a strong wind swept past in the next moment. Chen Luo flew through the air in an instant and disappeared in an instant. In the blink of an eye, Chen Luo arrived at the direction Qin just mentioned. He retracted his wings and returned to the ground, carefully observing the surrounding situation. Soon, when he opened his eyes again, there was a flash of light in his eyes. He turned his head and looked somewhere to his side, raised his feet, and walked forward. At the same time, just a few hundred meters in the direction of Chen Luo's advance, there was a deeply hidden secret passage buried in a seemingly inconspicuous dense forest. Crunch! With a heavy metal sound, the metal door of the passage was slowly pushed open, and then a 623 body was covered with steel, and a tall figure slowly walked out of the passage. Piotr came outside the dense forest, looked around to make sure there was no one else around, then turned around and whispered, Everyone come out, it's safe outside. After the words fell, immediately behind the metal gate, more than a dozen children who looked to be only about 10 years old walked out of the gate. When these children came out, they were followed closely by the ones who had been behind them. Bobby and John kept them safe. After finally making sure he was safe, John relaxed. He seemed to have thought of something, and his face turned extremely ugly. Damn it, who are those people? How dare they attack us? Don't they know the consequences of doing this? You must know that with the end of the New York War, they, who were also participants, are now known as Avengers to countless people around the world. As a member of superheroes, he never thought that one day they would suffer like this. Attack. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Finally, John shouted angrily, Pie it, Bobby. We must make those people pay the price. I think we might as well ask Chen for help. If Chen takes action, those people will never. John! Before he finished speaking, Poppy interrupted. What we should do most now is to ensure the safety of these children. We can discuss the next step after they are all settled. Chapter 512, Part 1. Hearing this, although there was still reluctance on John's face, he also understood that what Poppy said made sense. And in the end, he could only nod his head. You are right. Let's wait until these children are safe before we take action. Because tonight's attack came too suddenly. They were not prepared at all. They didn't even organize a decent counterattack, and they were broken through by the troops led by Stryker. It was not that they did not resist, but after seeing Scott and Logan fall to the ground after being hit by the anesthetic bullets fired by the opponent, their resistance could no longer hold on and collapsed instantly. What makes them even more at a loss is that even if they are attacked to this extent, the professor who has the most potential for a comeback with the power of the mind never appears for some unknown reason. After losing the top combat power of Professor Scott, they no longer had the strength to resist, and they fell to the ground one after another and were arrested. In the end, only a handful of them, less than 20 people, took advantage of the spread of the fire and secretly escaped from the secret passage, thus escaping the fate of being captured. Stryker was not unaware of their escape, but just when he was about to start hunting, the last message from John immediately stopped him from thinking. He did not dare to hesitate, and immediately chose to retreat. It was precisely because of Stryker's decisiveness and the fact that their team also had special mutants that could hide themselves that they were not discovered by Chen Luo and successfully retreated. The three of them had finished their discussion and were about to take the children away from here when suddenly, a familiar voice came from the dense forest not far away. Piet! Everyone was startled and subconsciously turned their heads to look at the source of the sound. Piotr and Bobby were even more alert, their bodies tensed, and they were ready to attack at any time. But then, when they finally saw the person clearly, they were stunned for a moment. Then a look of surprise appeared on their faces, and they hurried forward. Uncle Chen Luo, nodding to the three people and looking around. Chen Luo's face darkened. Are you the only ones who escaped? The joy on the faces of the three people froze. Their smiles suddenly became extremely stiff, and they nodded silently. Uncle Chen Luo. John gritted his teeth, his face full of anger, and whispered. Our other classmates, as well as teacher Logan and Scott, were all taken away by those people. In our home, all were destroyed by them. Although Bobby didn't speak, looking at their faces, it was clear that they were both filled with anger. After escaping from the college with difficulty, they were all at a loss. But now as Chen Luo arrived, the three of them suddenly had a backbone in their hearts, and they all looked in the direction of Chen Luo, waiting for him. Decide. Chen Luo patted John's shoulder lightly, and finally said, those people will definitely pay the price for what they did. But we need to understand first the true identities of those people, and where did they take the teachers to pick them up? Regarding the location of Stryker, Chen Luo's memory is a little unclear. He only vaguely remembers that it was in a dam. However, there are so many dams in the world that it is impossible to search for them one by one, so he still has to find a way to find the other party's location first. Can we discuss the next step of action? And the most important point is that it remains to be discussed whether the mastermind of this attack was Stryker. If the wrong target is found in the end, all the previous efforts will undoubtedly be in vain. You should have seen those people before. How about it? Do you know who they are? Hearing Chen Luo's question, the three of them looked at each other and shook their heads in frustration. We just saw those people wearing black uniforms and holding tranquilizer guns in their hands. We don't know the rest. As Chen Luo expected. In fact, even if they could capture a person alive for torture, I am afraid that the other party would end up like the previous John. He would die suddenly to prevent any information from being leaked from his mouth. In Chen Luo's view, such a control method must be possible only if there must be someone who is proficient in spiritual matters in the opponent's camp, or if there is relevant drug control. With such a method as a guarantee, if you want to gain control from those people, there is no doubt that the hope of finding out the whereabouts of the mastermind behind the scenes is slim. Moreover, when he came to the academy just now, Chen Luo had already explored the surrounding area. Even so, he could not find any trace of the other party. If he missed this opportunity, it would be much more difficult to find the other party's whereabouts next time. After thinking carefully for a moment, Chen Luo finally decided to wait until Qin and the others came back. Now if he wants to find the whereabouts of those people, Chen Luo has only one way. That is to find a mutant with psychic perception ability, and let him control the telepathy device in the college's underground base to determine the location of the professor and them, so that it is possible to find the whereabouts of the other party. With the decision made in his heart, Chen Luo immediately stopped hesitating, waved his hand, and immediately returned with John and other surviving mutants. Now that Chen Luo is in charge, if those people dare to come again, that will undoubtedly be the best, but it will save him the trouble of looking for the other party, and he can directly rescue the professor and the others. For this, John and others have no clue. Suspect. But it is a pity that after receiving the news of Chen Luo's action early, Stryker immediately chose to evacuate. How could he take the initiative to return and die? Therefore, Chen Luo and his party did not encounter any danger along the way and returned to the academy safely. Seeing this, Chen Luo sighed helplessly. Since the other party has not revealed any flaws, the best way now is to wait for Qin and the others to come back, and then use the instrument to search after about a few hours. Finally, a violent roar of engines sounded from the sky, and then, A fighter plane that looked like a bird and was completely black, Heheo Zhao, slowly descended from the sky and stopped on the ground. The cabin door opened, and Qin and Aurora hurriedly walked out of the door and came to Chen Luo. "Chen, how is the situation?" Chen Luo shook his head and pointed in the direction of John and others. Now the only ones left in the college are John and the others. Everyone else has been taken away by the intruders. After briefly telling the two of them the current situation, Chen Luo turned to look at Qin and said, "Qin, maybe you are the only one who can find the whereabouts of the professor and the others. I'm afraid I won't be able to help with this." Qin nodded, knowing in her heart that this method was their best option now. Moreover, the situation is urgent now. It has been several hours since the professor and the others were captured. Qin is also worried that the professor and the others will be in danger, so she does not hesitate and immediately walks towards the underground base, planning to start searching directly. Chapter 513, Part 1. Soon, everyone arrived at the base. Looking at the closed steel gate in front of them, Qin suddenly stopped. This gate was rebuilt after the Battle of Apocalypse. In order to defend against strong men like Apocalypse, Charles spent a lot of money to obtain several kilograms of vibranium from secret channels and covered it all in this gate. The surface of the gate. With the blessing of vibranium, the defense of this gate has now been improved by several levels. Even a player with astonishing brute strength like Hulk cannot break in from the front. If you want to enter through this gate, generally, it can only be unlocked when the system detects Charles himself. Even if Chen Luo has the ability to destroy it, because the metal vibranium is too rare, Chen Luo does not want to break in by force unless necessary, but this does not mean that he has nothing to do with this door. On the contrary, rather he has a better way than forcing a goal. Although this gate can defend against attacks at the demigod level, it has no way to deal with spatial abilities such as teleportation. Unfortunately, Chen Luo happens to have such an ability. Chen Luo stepped forward, took one of Qin's hands, and then with a thought, the two disappeared in an instant. The next moment, when the two of them appeared again, they were already in the room behind the door. Walking through the passage in front of her and coming to the console at the front, Qin reached out and picked up the helmet on the table, took a deep breath, and slowly put it on her head. He nodded to Chen Luo and decisively turned on the device switch. Chen Luo stood behind the other party, his face calm and not worried at all. As a person with psychic ability, Qin has now been promoted to the extraordinary level king and has reached the same height as Charles. Although Qin has more than just the ability of telepathy, her psychic power is not as strong as Charles's. So powerful, but controlling the instrument in front of me is no longer a problem. Qin had already tried this before. If it hadn't been for this, Chen Luo wouldn't be as relieved as he is now. However, just as he was quietly waiting for Qin's detection results, the next moment, Qin's originally calm face suddenly became extremely painful. At the same time, a tyrannical psychokinesis instantly burst out from Qin's body, forming a substantial flame and turning into a halo of flames spread rapidly around. Chen Luo's pupil shrank, and suddenly there was a throbbing in his heart. Almost subconsciously, a bloody light emerged from Chen Luo's body, completely wrapping Chen Luo. At this moment, the spreading flames finally came into contact with Chen Luo. At the moment of contact, Chen Luo, Aga's face suddenly changed, and the blood on his body instantly dissipated, and the flames continued to hit Chen Luo's chest. Huge amounts of impact came, and Chen Luo flew backwards uncontrollably, hitting the door behind him. Huge amounts of roar resounded in all directions instantly. The door behind him, covered with vibranium, absorbed the kinetic energy from Chen Luo's body. The surface was still as smooth as before, without a trace of scars. However, on the contrary, Chen Luo's situation at this moment became a bit miserable. The flesh and blood on the surface of his chest was decomposed by the flames just now, and his own ability to convert energy did not play any role. After defeating his own divine power, although the flames had dissipated a lot, they were still burning his flesh and blood tenaciously, until finally, in just when it was about to touch the heart, the energy contained in the flame was finally exhausted and completely dissipated. As the flames dissipated, Chen Luo's super speed regeneration also came into play. Flesh and blood regenerated at a speed visible to the naked eye. By the time Chen Luo stood up again, his injuries had completely recovered. But at this moment, he didn't care about his injury at all. Looking at Qin, who still looked in pain in front of him, Chen Luo moved his feet and came to the opponent in an instant. He glanced around, and suddenly, when he saw a corner beside him, Chen Luo immediately noticed something unusual. I saw that in the solution connected to the interface of the telepathy device, the original blue color had long since disappeared, as if it had been contaminated by something, and it had become pitch black. Seeing this, Chen Luo immediately realized. If he was right, I am afraid that the telepathy device has been tampered with by the other party. As long as someone wants to use this device, there will be corresponding backlash, just like now. Thinking of this, Chen Luo's eyes flashed with a cold luster, and he suppressed the boiling, killing intent in his patience. His divine power surged out and turned into a sharp blade, instantly cutting through the solution below. The device carrying the solution was split into two instantly. As the solution flowed out of the device, the telepathy instrument also stopped functioning. The pain on Qin's face gradually subsided, and his body finally gained strength. He took off his helmet, his breathing was rapid, and his face was extremely pale. "Qin, how are you?" Chen Luo stepped forward and reached out to touch Qin's face, his eyes full of concern. Qin shook her head with a weak look and said softly, "Chen, I'm fine, but this instrument can no longer be used now. How should we find the whereabouts of the professor and them?" Seeing the eagerness in Qin's eyes, Chen Luo's heart sank, and he fell silent for a while. After the telepathy instrument was destroyed, even Chen Luo was unable to find the whereabouts of the professor and his group in a short time. Even as a demigod, he was unable to do anything about this. Unless his ability is the same as that of the professor, then with his demigod-level divine power, he can cover the entire world with consciousness and find the location of the target. However, his ability does not involve the spiritual aspect, so this path is obvious. Not very feasible. Looking at the helmet on the table, Chen Luo suddenly had an idea in his mind. Maybe asking Tony to help repair the helmet is also a way. But even if Chen Luo has confidence in his friend's ability, it will take some time to completely repair it. What they lack most now is time. After all, the longer the professor and they fall into the hands of the opponent, the more likely they are to be in danger. What if they were killed before Tony could repair the instrument? Wouldn't all their efforts have been in vain? Putting this method behind him for the time being, Chen Luo frowned and thought quickly in his mind. After thinking hard for a moment, Chen Luo finally turned his attention to psychic ability. As for which method could allow them to find the target location in the shortest time, telepathy was definitely the best choice. Although the instrument that can amplify telepathy ability is now destroyed, if a replacement can be found and then let Qin try to control it, it may be possible to achieve the same effect as the electric one. Enhance the power of the mind. Wait, Chen Luo seemed to remember something, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Only now did he finally recall that after the battle in New York, he had harvested 2 infinite gems, and one of them happened to be the Mind Stone that could control the mind. If Qin can control the power of this gem, she might be able to amplify her consciousness and cover the entire world. Once she succeeds, finding the whereabouts of the professor and them will not be a problem. Thinking of this, Chen Luo was about to speak out his solution, but before he could speak, he suddenly thought of something again and his face changed slightly. Chapter 514, Part 1. At this moment, he suddenly realized that although the power of the mind gem could indeed enable them to achieve their goals, controlling this gem was not something ordinary people could do. Even now, he cannot directly contact the infinite gems and can only rely on the power of the Infinity Gauntlet to indirectly exert the power of the gems. However, even with the help of Infinity Gauntlet, Chen Luo's current ability can only use the power of 1 gem at most. If he wants to use the ability of 2 or more gems at the same time, his power needs to go 1 step further. If he's like this, let alone Qin. Although Chen Luo also understands that there is a more powerful force sleeping in Qin's body. Once it is fully activated, it will not be a problem even if it comes into direct contact with the gem. But when that time comes, will the personality that has been trapped in Qin's body for many years appear? Whatever the problem was, it was beyond Chen Luo's expectation. Once the opponent is released from the trap, Dark Phoenix will completely resuscitate from Qin's body and be taken over by another personality in his body. Will Qin at that time still be the Qin he knows? If things really go as he thinks and develop towards the worst-case scenario, he may not be able to compete with Dark Phoenix's power by then. In addition, the opponent will probably have an infinite gems in his hand at that time. Together, they can turn the entire Earth into hell in an instant. When Chen Luo thought about it, the threat that Qin brought to them at that time was probably no less than the threat that Thanos brought to the Earth in person. With their current strength, if they were to face such a powerful god-level person, what would greet them would be very difficult. It may be death. Thinking of this, Chen Luo felt a little hesitant for a while, wondering whether this method was good or bad. Seeing that Chen Luo was hesitant to speak, Qin instantly saw his hesitation and perked up. She realized that he probably already had a solution, and quickly asked, "Chen Luo, have you already thought of a solution?" Chen Luo paused for a moment, looked at the anxious look on Qin's face, and finally let out a long sigh and said with a wry smile, "I do have a way here, but this method is also very risky. Once it fails, the consequences will be terrible. What we can bear? What will be the consequences? The consequences may be dozens or hundreds of times more serious than the original war in New York." Qin's eyes opened slightly, and she opened her mouth, her face full of shock. As a personal participant in that war, Qin was very aware of the horror of that war. And now, in Chen Luo's words, his method was likely to lead to consequences that were hundreds of times more serious than that war. Wouldn't that be even more serious? Could the entire Earth be destroyed in one fell swoop? Thinking of such consequences, even though she was very anxious about the safety of her fellow students, like Chen Luo, she fell into hesitation, with a face full of struggle. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became stagnant. However, this atmosphere did not last long. The next moment, a dull knocking sound suddenly came from outside the door, waking the two of them up instantly. What did you say? It seems that Aurora and the others have something to talk to us about. Chen Luo came back to his senses, picked up Qin, turned around, and walked towards the door. Since the instruments here can no longer function, there is no need for them to stay here. So Chen Luo did not stay here. With a thought, he immediately left here with Qin. When he came outside the gate, Chen Luo was about to speak, but as he glanced around, he seemed to see something, and a light suddenly burst out in his eyes. Kurt, why are you here? Looking behind the crowd, looking at the little boy with blue skin and a slender tail waving behind him, Chen Luo strode forward and asked. Chen! Behind him, John said excitedly. Kurt just ran back from the people who attacked us. He knows the location of those people. Great, those damn bastards. I'm going to make them pay. Chen, let's go quickly. Hearing this, Chen Luo's eyes shone even brighter, and he couldn't help but feel a hint of joy in his heart. Originally, he was still worried about finding the whereabouts of his enemy, but he didn't expect the surprise to come so quickly. With Kurt's successful return, he no longer had to think about his method just now, which made Chen Ke feel relieved. Tone, don't worry yet. Chen Luo waved his hand, looked at Kurt, and asked, Kurt, tell us what you know. Who are those people? Kurt nodded and quickly told the situation there. Just as Chen Luo thought, this attack was indeed carried out by Colonel Stryker. Zero. Please give me flowers. Zero. Moreover, the reason why Chen Luo did not detect the whereabouts of that troop before was because there was a mutant with the color-changing ability among the troop led by Stryker. Moreover, this mutant can not only change its own color, but can even change the color of other people and even the vehicles they ride on. Under the cover of this ability, the army can smoothly blend into the night, making it completely indistinguishable with the naked eye. As for the other party's method of controlling mutants, Kurt also faintly detected some information, which seemed to be related to a special mutant next to Stryker. Looking from a distance, the other party seemed to be sitting in a wheelchair and seemed to have difficulty moving. But he just glanced at it from a distance, and the other party seemed to be aware of it. Because he was worried that he would be discovered by the other party, Kurt did not dare to stay here any longer. After learning the location of the other party's base, he immediately used teleportation to escape and return to the base. Stryker. After hearing Kurt's news, John gritted his teeth and said with hatred in his eyes, he will pay the price. Qin struggled to get off Chen Luo with an anxious look on her face. Chen, let's go quickly. I'm worried that Professor and the others may be in danger. Chen Luo nodded, glanced at everyone, thought for a while, and then said, this operation, Piotr Bobby John, you come with me, Aurora. You stay here with Qin. No, I want to go too. Hearing this, Qin's face became anxious and said quickly, listen to me. Chen Luo said without any doubt, you were injured just now. It's best to rest here during this operation. Aurora, you stay and take care of her. Aurora nodded. Leave it to me here. Professor Chen, I'll leave it to you. Chen Luo nodded, looked at the others, said no more, and immediately left with John and the three of them, followed by Kodai. Looking at the 5 people disappearing in place, Qin frowned, worry visible to the naked eye on his face. Qin, don't worry. Seeing this, Aurora said to comfort him. It's not like you don't know Chen's strength. There must be no problem. The professor and the others will definitely be able to come back safely. Hearing this, Qin's frown gradually calmed down. She nodded slightly and relaxed. At the same time, under the leadership of Kurt, Chen Luo and his party finally arrived at their destination. Chapter 515, Part 1. In a dense forest, Chen Luo and his team suddenly emerged from the air. After Kurt's guidance, the base finally appeared in front of everyone. A few hundred meters away from them, in the middle of a wide river, a huge amount of dam sits on it, stretching for hundreds of meters. The wall is made of reinforced concrete, intercepting thousands of tons of water flow behind it. The outer layer of the wall, it is covered with a layer of mottled marks, bearing the traces of time. And that's where Stryker's base is. Is this right here? Looking at the dam in front of him, the fiery John immediately wanted to take action directly, but before he could take a step forward, Chen Luo's voice sounded the next moment. John! Putting out his hand to stop the other party, Chen Luo looked forward without looking back. Leave Stryker and the others to me. You stay here to take care of them. But 173. Don't forget. Seeing what John wanted to say, Chen Luo continued. With your current strength, those people in front of you have no chance of winning. So as long as you rescue the professor and others, You are already helping. Do you understand? Don't be impulsive. John's tone was stagnant, and he was silent for a long time. He nodded reluctantly and agreed. I see. Recalling the scene of the previous battle with that army, although he was reluctant to admit it, John also knew in his heart that with their current strength, if Chen Luo had not been with them, even if they could find the whereabouts of the opponent's base this time, if you rush forward to rescue someone rashly, you will just die in vain. Bobby and the others also understood this truth, so they had no objection at all and immediately nodded in agreement. After assigning the tasks, Chen Luo took the lead to set off, and with a sudden change of heart, he disappeared from the spot. According to the previous plan, when Chen Luo made noise in the base, it was time for them to start the rescue. So before that, they stood quietly, waiting for the signal from Chen Luo. In the dam ahead, waves of ripples appeared in the air, and Chen Luo appeared in front of the gate of the base below the dam. He raised his head, looked at the camera above his head, and said calmly, "Striker, come out and see me," in the base monitoring room. The moment he saw Chen Luo, a piercing alarm sounded, and then a middle-aged man wearing a military uniform with gray hair and sharp eyes walked in. "What happened?" Striker asked in a deep voice. "Sir, our base has been discovered." "Huh? Who is he?" Striker's eyes narrowed, and he quickly stepped forward and looked at the screen in front of him. However, when he saw the extremely familiar face on the screen, Striker's expression suddenly changed, and he spoke sternly without thinking. "Quick, officer-level alert!" The moment he saw Chen Luo, Striker's heart suddenly tightened, and even breathing began to become difficult. His spirit was highly tense, as if his heart was pinched by an invisible hand, and the shadow of death firmly enveloped him. Inside, as the head of the special forces of the Eagle Country's military, Striker naturally has the authority to know the existence of Chen Luo. Especially after seeing the specific scenes of the New York battle, he understood what this man named Blood God actually had. What a terrifying strength! Judging from the opponent's performance in that battle, it is no exaggeration to say that even the combined number of their entire country's troops cannot be his opponent. For such a terrifying existence, Striker does not want to be an enemy. But the relationship between Chen Luo and the mutants in the college is there, and with the success of his research, the next plan needs to control the professor to be realized. So even facing the pressure brought by Chen Luo, after waiting for more than a month, he finally chose to take action. But the timing of his attack was also carefully calculated. After nearly a month of investigation, Zaiqin and Aurora finally left the academy and led their troops to launch a surprise attack at night when everyone was unprepared. Everything was going smoothly, but as luck would have it, just in case, Striker deliberately left an army dozens of miles away from the academy as a response. If there was any problem at the academy, it would be this army that would be sent to moment of use. It was because of this arrangement that when the troops were rushing to assemble at their destination, they saw the Bumblebee parked at the foot of a nearby mountain. In order to prevent the news from leaking, they immediately launched an attack on the Bumblebee and planned to destroy the vehicle before returning. Go up the mountain and clean up Chen Luo and others. So after being attacked, Bumblebee immediately transformed and fought back, and then they were very lucky to meet Chen Luo and others who were camping. After a brief and fierce battle, not only was the backup force completely wiped out, but one of the strongest models among their experimental subjects, the Juggernaut, also fell into the hands of Chen Luo and suffered heavy losses. No! After receiving the news that Chen Luo was coming, Striker didn't even have time to pay attention to the survivors who had escaped and immediately chose to retreat. After seeing that Chen Luo did not catch up, Striker secretly breathed a sigh of relief. After thinking that he was safe, he rushed towards the base at full speed. However, not long after they returned to the base, Chen Luo came to the door. Looking at the calm face in front of the screen, Striker's face was extremely gloomy, and an unprecedented sense of urgency arose in his heart. No, we must take action immediately. As soon as he thought of this, a sharp light flashed in Striker's eyes, and he immediately gave the order. Release all the experimental subjects in the base, and then gather all the troops to stop him. Our plan will be successful soon. Buy me some time. Before the plan is completed, no matter how many of you die, you can't let him get close to the laboratory. Yes, everyone else in the base was also controlled by Striker, so they did not resist his orders at all. They agreed in unison and immediately started taking action. Striker did not stay here any longer. He knew Chen Luo's strength very well. Even if all the experimental subjects in the base were dispatched, and all the troops in the base gathered together, they would not be able to block the opponent for a long time. Once they wait, if the other party breaks through and rescues the professor, then his plan will no longer be possible. Wait a little longer as long as my plan can be realized, even if I pay for it with my life. I will have no regrets. A firm light flashed in Striker's eyes. He took a deep breath and strode forward towards the laboratory. At the same time, on the other side in front of the base gate, Chen Luo waited for a moment and saw that the other party still had no response. He frowned and suddenly felt a little troublesome. Chapter 516, Part 1. With Chen Luo's strength, it would be easy to kill all Stryker and the others. But before that, Chen Luo had not forgotten the existence of the other people in the academy. As far as Chen Luo knows, the troops under Stryker are all under his control in some way, so there is no guarantee that this method will not be used on professors or other people in the college. Once this happens, if you take action, these people may be in danger. Definitely, this is the worst-case scenario that Chen Luo thought. After all, only a few hours have passed since these people were captured by the other party. The possibility of controlling the professor and them in such a short period of time is extremely small. But just in case, Chen Luo still wants to use the most effective method to solve the problem. As long as the source of Stryker can be directly controlled, their safety will undoubtedly be guaranteed. So based on this idea, Chen Luo made the move he did before. But now it seems that Stryker is obviously not as stupid as he thought and really dared to appear in front of him. It seems there is only one other way. After giving up his original idea, Chen Luo's eyes narrowed and he immediately took action. He stretched his hands forward and instantly inserted them into the 0-6 steel gate in front of him. Immediately afterwards, Chen Luo opened his arms and tore them apart violently. A violent vibration was heard, and the gate was shaken by a huge force and bent outwards. Folded and forcefully torn in half by Chen Luo. He casually threw the door behind him and looked at the long steel passage behind the door. Without stopping, his body turned into a long afterimage and disappeared in an instant. At the same time, not far from the passage, a mutant team of about 30 people, wearing experimental clothing with numbers X2 and 30 engraved on the chests, was gathering towards the passage. At the front of the team, a heavily armed and capable-looking man urged everyone behind him anxiously, trying to rush to the destination as quickly as possible to stop Chen Luo from invading. Boom! At this moment, there was a sudden violent vibration from the other side of the door, and the ground began to shake slightly. Feeling this movement, the man's face suddenly changed, and he subconsciously turned around and shouted, "Be careful. He has already come in. By now." Before he finished speaking, the next moment, Chen Luo's voice sounded in his ears. When he heard this voice, the man's hair stood up instantly, and his heart was shrouded in the shadow of death. Well, before they could even see the appearance of the person coming, a breeze blew by. When Chen Luo appeared behind these people again, an undetectable thin line of blood in the air came into his body. Then, everyone behind Chen Luo only felt a pain in their necks. His vision went dark, and his consciousness fell into silence for an instant. Puff puff! Dozens of blood pillars rose into the sky, and heads rolled down. Looking at the figures falling to the ground behind him, Chen Luo's eyes flashed with blood. He did not stop here, and started to spread blood in the base at full speed. Slaughter. Under Stryker's order, all the troops in the base began to gather and rush towards the passage gate. By coincidence, the direction they were heading in happened to collide with Chen Luo head-on. Facing this army formed by ordinary people, even with their strength, they are well-deserved elites among humans. But in front of Chen Luo, who is a demigod, there is still no room for resistance. It was just a face-to-face encounter just like before. Before they could even react, blood appeared on their necks. Their heads fell off one after another, and blood spurted out, instantly turning the ground red. In less than half a minute, all the troops who went to support were killed by Chen Luo. Nearly 1,000 corpses covered the passage in front and behind him. All the heads fell aside, and the eyes were gray and had no time to close. He stared around, adding a bit of blood and weirdness to the place. Tick-tock! In the center of the corpse, Chen Luo slowly raised his steps. Blood was dripping from the blood-stained shoe uppers. As he walked in the empty passage ahead, bloody footprints appeared. Along with the deathly silence around him, it was like the arrival of the death god, harvesting those sinful souls in the world. The body turned into a strong wind, and Chen Luo explored the environment in all directions in the base in just a few minutes. Along the way, in the underground secret rooms, Chen Luo also successfully found those who were killed by Stryker. Captured mutant, and fortunately, none of these people fell under Stryker's control. After some investigation, Chen Luo found the whereabouts of the students from the college among these mutants, but the professor, Scott, Hank, and Logan were not among them. Uncle Chen Luo. In the crowd, Shadowcat Katie held Chen Luo's hands tightly. Her sweet face was full of worry at the moment, and her tone was trembling. Just over an hour ago, I saw Scott and the others being raped. Those people took them away. And the professor, he seemed to be taken somewhere by Stryker alone. I have heard from other mutant partners in the base that as long as the mutants taken away by Stryker will not die because of the failure of the experiment. But if they can survive in the end, they will all be transformed by Stryker into mutants who only take orders from him. Uncle Chen Luo, do you think the professors have already? As she spoke, Katie's eyes were filled with tears. After a long silence, Chen Luo reached out and rubbed Katie's hair, with a faint smile on his face. Don't worry, Professor. They will be fine. I will save them. Katie, take the others out quickly. Bobby and the others are waiting outside to help you. As for this place, leave it to me. Do you understand? Katie was also a member of the team that participated in the New York War, and her mental quality was already different from when she first graduated from the academy. After hearing this, she took a deep breath, and 873 immediately regained her composure, nodded vigorously, and agreed. After saying goodbye to Katie, Chen Luo walked in the direction Katie pointed just now, towards where Stryker was. Perception passed all the way, and then about 3 minutes passed. When Chen Luo passed an intersection, he suddenly stopped. Looking at the figure standing in front of him, Chen Luo frowned slightly, and his heart sank. Really? Less than 10 meters in front of Chen Luo, 4 figures were seen standing quietly. Scott, Logan, Hank, and a strong Asian woman lined up in a row to block Chen Luo. After hearing the news brought by Katie, Chen Luo was already prepared. Now Logan and the others may have been controlled by Stryker. Logan! He tried to call out to the other party, but Logan ignored him at all. He lowered his hands, and 6 metal claws broke through the barrier of flesh and blood and poked out from between his fingers. He looked at Chen Luo with murderous intent in his eyes and roared wildly. Launched the attack without any hesitation. Almost at the same moment, the woman next to Logan also started to take action. The nails on her hands swelled and formed 10 slender metal claws. Her body was like a flexible leopard, and she rushed forward with Logan on the left and right. Hit! And just when the two were about to come into contact with Chen Luo, the next moment, Chen Luo finally made a move. Chapter 517, Part 1. With a flash of light in his eyes and a thought in his mind, the blood-colored divine power instantly surged out of his body and turned into a long blood-colored rope, tightly binding and wrapping Logan. After controlling Logan's actions, Chen Luo will not be as polite to another woman as he is to Logan. His right hand turned into an afterimage, and he thrust forward. The next moment, the opponent's body suddenly stopped in midair, and he could no longer move forward. Click! With a casual pinch, the other person's neck instantly turned back 180 degrees, making a crisp sound. His body twitched slightly, and then fell into silence quickly. Without hesitation, Chen Luo kept the other person aside and walked forward without stopping. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind hit from behind, and the air was pierced by 10 slender claws. The ends of the claws flashed with cold light and stabbed Chen Luo's throat, eyes, and other parts. However, the moment the sharp claws touched Chen Luo's body, the energy contained in the sharp claws was instantly absorbed by Chen Luo, and he could no longer move forward. Chen Luo turned his head and looked behind him. Behind him, the woman whose neck he had crushed had completely recovered and quietly launched an attack. Seeing the other person return to his normal appearance, Chen Luo immediately realized that this person was probably another artificial mutant with super self-healing ability created by Stryker using Logan's genes, plus the adamantium injected into it by Stryker. With her strength, even Logan is no match for her. But even so, her strength is still not worth mentioning in Chen Luo's eyes. After being surprised for a moment, Chen Luo quickly reacted. A light flashed in his eyes, and with a thought, the blood-colored divine power instantly enveloped him. The blood light swept across, and as the blood color dissipated, all the blood in the opponent's body was instantly absorbed, and the body instantly became withered like a dried corpse, falling powerlessly and making no sound anymore. After losing all his blood, the opponent's vitality seemed to have been completely drained away. There was no sign of recovery, and he completely fell into Chen Luo's hands. After finishing dealing with his opponent, Chen Luo kept moving forward without stopping. Roar! Seeing this, Hank let out a roar, got down on all fours, and threw himself forward like a beast. At the same time, behind Hank, Scott immediately opened his eye mask, and a torrent of red energy shot out from his eyes and blasted towards Chen Luo. Facing the attacks of the two men, Chen Luo had no intention of stopping. Divine power surged out his body and turned into a bloody rope, instantly wrapping Hank. Chen Luo then left him beside Logan to keep him company. Immediately afterwards, a flash of red light emerged in Chen Luo's eyes. The next moment, a dazzling heat vision burst out and precisely collided with the laser light in front. Boom! Violent airflow rapidly spewed and spread in all directions. When the two powerful energy torrents collided, the surrounding temperature increased rapidly. At the intersection of the two torrents, the surrounding thick steel walls melted under the terrifying high temperature and turned into waves. The crimson liquid flowed down and spread around. Feeling the power of the opponent's laser, Chen Luo sighed in his heart. Only when there is no restraint at all can Scott exert the full power of his eyes. Such power would only be achieved if his heat vision was at the same level as the opponent's. I'm afraid it's impossible to tell the difference. But it is a pity that after promoting the heat vision to the demigod level, this ability has become qualitatively different from that of laser. With a sudden thought, the power of the heat vision skyrocketed again. In the blink of an eye, it overwhelmed the laser light in front of him and spread towards Scott unhurriedly. Seeing the incoming attack in front of him, Scott's face changed slightly. Without thinking, he immediately closed his eyes and dodged the heat vision attack. Boom! The heat vision continued unabated and blasted behind Scott. Under the effect of the terrifying high temperature, the wall several meters thick behind him was instantly penetrated, and the huge lake blocked behind the wall was also evaporated instantly. A white steam burst out, and a dazzling blood-colored light pillar rose into the sky, submerged into the sky, and then gradually disappeared and dissipated. When the heat vision dissipated, the water flow that had been blocked quickly poured in along the gap. With this breakthrough, coupled with the terrifying pressure of thousands of tons from the outside world, countless cracks spread rapidly around the gap, and the speed of water inflow increased again. If this continues, it may completely collapse at any time. Looking at the water rushing into the channel in front of him, Chen Luo dodged, came up behind Scott, knocked him out with one blow, and then disappeared instantly with the three of them. After sending the three people to the outside world to join Bobby and others, Chen Luo returned again. Now only the professor is left in the base and has not been found. In addition, the base may collapse at any time, so Chen Luo did not continue to waste time and speed up. Start looking. Soon, when he searched the entire base, and finally at the deepest part of the base, Chen Luo finally stopped. Looking at the only door in front of him that he had never looked for, Chen Luo showed no hesitation at all. He stretched out his hands and tore it in half. Then, the scene inside the door was suddenly revealed in front of Chen Luo's eyes. Found it. 3 figures stood in front of them. One of them was wearing a military uniform, and the other 2 figures, one of them was undoubtedly the professor. As for the other one, he was sitting in a wheelchair like the professor, wearing a white hospital gown with a thin figure. Looks very weak. Looking at the 3 figures in front of him, Chen Luo turned his eyes to the figure standing among them and spoke in a deep voice. Stryker? Chen Luo, you're finally here. Seeing Chen Luo's arrival, Stryker didn't look surprised at all. His face was extremely calm, and on the contrary, he had a calmness about being in control. Chen Luo moved his feet and was in front of the other party in an instant, looking directly into his eyes. I think you should know the consequences of doing this. You're right. Stryker nodded and did not deny it. I have already thought about the consequences before carrying out my plan. But then, Stryker changed the subject. But so what? As long as I can achieve my goal, I have already made all preparations, even if the consequences are mine. What do you want to do? Chen Luo looked behind the other person, looked at the figure who was behind the professor at the moment, and asked, It's very simple, Qian Zhao. I want all mutants in this world to disappear. Stryker's eyes were solemn, with an unforgettable hatred on his face. As long as I can make mutants disappear from this world, I am willing to give anything to achieve this goal. Only Professor, now you can't stop me. Even if you kill me, he will continue to carry out my orders until all mutants are eliminated. From today on, mutants will truly become history. After saying that, Stryker suddenly burst out laughing enthusiastically. Really? Chen Luo smiled slightly and waved his hand. The next moment, a bloody light flashed past Stryker and shot towards the figure behind him into the hall. Before Stryker could react, the blood light turned into a bloody sickle, instantly splitting the figure in half and falling to the ground dead. Chapter 518, Part 1. Subconsciously, Stryker turned around. When Stryker saw the scene behind him, the smile on his face stopped, his pupils tightened, and he stood frozen in place for an instant. William! Less than a few seconds after Chen Luo took action, the professor, who had been silent all this time, suddenly shook his body, and the confusion in his eyes instantly dissipated, and he regained his senses. Turning around and looking at Chen Luo's figure, and then at the body that had been broken into 2 pieces at his feet, Charles sighed and said nothing more. Stryker, what's up? It seems like your goal can't be achieved now. Looking at Charles, who had regained consciousness, Chen Luo felt relieved. Looking at Stryker in front of him, a faint smile appeared on his face. How did you know? Stryker suddenly turned around, looked at Chen Luo, and asked through gritted teeth. The reason why he can control mutants like Professor Logan is because of the man who was killed by Chen Luo just now, his son, William Stryker. As a born awakening mutant, William has unconsciously begun to release his ability since he was a few years old, creating various illusions around him that affect people within 10 steps around him. Just like Stryker and his wife, because they stay with each other all year round, 703 suffers from it every moment. This situation did not change even after Stryker sent William to study with the professor for a period of time. On the contrary, after returning home from the academy, William's ability became more and more powerful. and the illusion he created became more and more real. Finally, it lasted for several years. Finally, one night his wife, William's the mother, could not bear the torture of the hallucinations and shot herself. After returning home and seeing all this, Stryker felt extremely sad. At the same time, he also believed that mutant was a cancer in the world. Only by completely eradicating it from the world would no one continue to suffer tragedies like his family. So from then on, Stryker aimed to eliminate all mutants and joined the mutant research department established by the government to conduct research. Later, when he became the helmsman of this department, after a series of inhumane studies on mutants, Stryker finally mastered the method of controlling his son, William. In order to make William's ability fully available to him, Stryker used drugs to paralyze all of his limbs, and also made a series of modifications to his brain so that he could only listen to his orders. Such actions have long been forgotten. He treats him as his own son. After successfully taking William into his hands, Stryker was able to successfully control many mutants with the help of William's mental illusion ability. Even a being like Juggernaut, who could rival Hulk, could not escape his control. But that's not the most important thing. Stryker knew in his heart that only by successfully controlling the world's strongest psychic ability, Professor X, would his plan be possible. In order to achieve his goal, even though he knew the relationship between Chen Luo and the college, he still chose to take action. Under his careful planning, while Chen Luo was not in the college and Sheen and Aurora went out to perform tasks, he finally seized the opportunity, took advantage of the night to raid the college, and capture the professor in one fell swoop. But unfortunately, shortly after his success, news of Chen Luo's appearance came from John's side. After realizing that Chen Luo would soon know the news, Stryker did not dare to neglect and returned to the base as quickly as possible. He raced against time and began to implement his plan. Under William's powerful mental illusion, Scott Logan and others had no room for resistance and were successfully controlled by him in a short period of time. However, the teaching staff was not so smooth. After all, the professor possesses the strongest psychic power in the world. Even if he was severely injured during the sneak attack and his consciousness fell into a coma, he could still persist under William's invasion by relying solely on his own instincts until it was only a few hours later that William finally found the flaw. His consciousness was retreating steadily, and he might completely collapse at any time. If this progress continues, William will be able to successfully control it in less than a few minutes. As long as the professor can obey his orders, Stryker is confident that with this special psychic amplification device that he spent several years imitating, all the mutants in the world will die under the power of the professor's mind in less than a minute. But just when he was about to succeed, Chen Luo finally succeeded in finding Stryker and others, and instantly opened the door in front that could protect against missile bombardment, and appeared in front of him. In order to buy time for William to completely control the professor, Stryker quickly came to Chen Luo decisively and tried to use himself to attract Chen Luo's attention until the professor put on the helmet and started to implement his plan. When he thought about it, even if Chen Luo saw William behind him, sitting motionless in a wheelchair, he would never have thought that the key to controlling the professor was in him. However, before he could react, the next moment, Chen Luo suddenly took action and killed William. With the death of William, all the mutants controlled by William have regained their consciousness at this moment. Looking at the professor who regained consciousness, Stryker's eyes instantly turned blood red, staring at Chen Luo, wishing to eat him alive. Meat, you don't need to know. But in response to Stryker's questioning, Chen Luo obviously had no intention of talking nonsense to him. After seeing the professor recover, Chen Luo's eyes flashed with blood, and the divine power in his body surged out, turning into a thick blood light, instantly surrounding Stryker. After doing all this, Chen Luo ignored the other party and strode to the professor. Chen, I'm really bothering you this time. Looking at Chen Luo in front of him, Charles sighed softly, his face full of emotion. Don't be polite to me, Professor. Chen Luo shook his head and reached for the wheelchair behind the professor with his right hand. Everyone is safe now. This base is about to collapse. Let's get out now. Hearing this, the professor's expression changed. He looked at the big bloody cocoon behind Chen Luo. His lips moved slightly, but in the end he didn't say anything more and nodded lightly. Then Chen Luo didn't hesitate at all. With a thought, the next moment, the two of them disappeared from the spot. Not long after the two disappeared, a raging flood poured in from the front door, instantly submerging everything here. Under the erosion of countless floods, this ancient base that had existed for nearly 100 years soon turned into ruins and was buried forever under this new huge lake. Chapter 519, Part 1. The flood was surging, and the endless flow of water washed away huge amounts of cracks in the dam in front. With bursts of rumbling sounds, the dam wall was blasted into countless pieces by the huge kinetic energy carried by the flood, and finally they were all submerged in the water. In the dense forest hundreds of meters away, there were waves of fluctuations in the air, And then the figures of Chen Luo and the professor slowly appeared on the spot. Looking at the large group of people standing behind him, Chen Luo waved, and the three of them quickly stepped out. "List, how's it going? Have people come out?" The three people nodded repeatedly and replied, "We have already asked. All the mutants in the base are already here. There are no omissions." After hearing their answers, Chen Luo didn't say anything more. He turned to look at the huge torrent in front of him. It was running endlessly. It flowed past the hill at their feet and surrounded the hill in the blink of an eye. In the center, looking at the huge white wave visible to the naked eye in the distance that still never stops. When the next huge wave comes, they are afraid that their location will be completely submerged. Therefore, Chen Luo had no intention of staying here anymore, and organized everyone to surround him. The moment the huge wave was about to arrive, Chen Luo and everyone behind him disappeared in an instant. The huge waves rolled and instantly submerged the hilltop where Dong Luo and others were before. Then I don't know how long it took. The land with a radius of dozens of miles was completely submerged by endless floods and connected with the original lake, forming an unprecedented huge lake. Viewed from a high altitude, it looked like a mosaic of stars. The blue diamonds in the land looked dazzling, but these have nothing to do with Chen Luo and the others. The next moment, the originally empty grassland in front of the college's teaching building was suddenly covered by a large black crowd. Seeing these people suddenly appearing, Qin and Aurora, who had been waiting here for a long time, became energetic and hurriedly greeted them. List, looking at the familiar figure at the front of the crowd, Qin walked over quickly, turned her eyes, and felt relieved when she saw the familiar figures behind Chen Luo. "Great, you are back." With the death of Stryker and William, after waking up from the coma, Logan and others who were originally controlled finally woke up. Definitely, the juggernaut who had been suppressed deep in the academy base by Chen Luo finally recovered at this moment. Sober. Now that everything here has been resolved, and everyone finally escaped from the base after experiencing all this, the exhausted people could no longer hold on, and went to rest under the arrangements of Qin and Aurora. Chen Luo finally had his hands free to deal with Juggernaut's affairs. After saying goodbye to everyone, Chen Luo dodged and appeared in front of a gate deep in the base. As the gate opened, Hong Kong's figure gradually emerged. In the empty room, Juggernaut's body was wrapped with blood-colored chains, tightly imprisoning his body and preventing him from making any movement. "It seems you are awake." When he came to the other party, Chen Luo's eyes flashed and Taguchi said, "Who are you? Why am I here?" Apparently Juggernaut had been controlled for a long period of time. Not only did he know nothing about Chen Luo's identity, but after some understanding, Chen Luo even discovered that the other party's memory actually stayed before Chen Luo was resurrected. As for what happened next, know nothing about everything. After Juggernaut listened to Chen Luo's story and realized that he had been controlled all these years, he became angry instantly. His eyes were blood red, and he struggled crazily to get out, smashing Strikers into pieces. "Okay, calm down." Blood flashed in Chen Luo's eyes. The moment he was stared at by Chen Luo, Juggernaut's movements froze, his heart tightened, and a heavy sense of oppression came, as if there was a death god in front of him. Standing still, you will harvest his soul at any time. Under such heavy pressure, Juggernaut finally regained his composure and looked at Chen Luo without saying a word. Seeing this, Chen Luo told the other party the news that Stryker was dead. Seeing Juggernaut's silent expression, Chen Luo thought for a while and said, "So, what are your plans next?" "Huh." Hearing this, Juggernaut raised his head and looked at Chen Luo with some confusion. "You want to let me go?" Chen Luo nodded, but then changed the subject. "However, you can also have another choice." "What choice?" "Join us." Chen Luo waved his hand casually, and the chains that bound the other party instantly turned into countless blood-colored light spots and dissipated. He looked at the other party and said slowly, "I'm afraid of being like you can no longer live an ordinary life. If you appear in front of some caring people, I'm afraid the same fate that awaits you will be the same as before. Sir, please give me flowers. But as long as you join us, I can give you my promise. No one in this world will dare to take action against you. If that happens, Stryker's fate will be an example for them." After just realizing that the Juggernaut in front of him still had the possibility of communication, Chen Luo's heart suddenly moved, and he had the idea of taking him under his command. With the other party's ability, once it is used to the extreme, he can briefly interact with the demigod. The existence of a strong opponent. Such combat power is very rare on the Earth, so he cannot help but ignore it. And according to his memory, in the original timeline, Juggernaut also worked for Eric. Since the other party can do it, he naturally has the possibility to conquer him. Zero. With the addition of such a powerful warrior, I think it will play a big role in the fight against Thanos in the future. On the other side, after hearing Chen Luo's words, Juggernaut was also a little moved. Although he has a physique comparable to Hulk, this does not mean that his IQ is low. Although he still does not understand Chen Luo's identity, Even he has no idea about the power Chen Luo possesses. I couldn't help but feel a little afraid. He has absolute confidence in how powerful his power is. Even if he was controlled by Stryker a few years ago, it was because the other party took advantage of him not paying attention, and he was indeed not good at mental aspects. But this does not mean that Juggernaut's power is weak. As the ruler of the Crimson Universe and the spokesperson of the evil god Ceterak on the Earth, Juggernaut can even fight against the powerful demigods by relying on his own evil power. Qualifications. But even so, the power he is proud of is so vulnerable in front of Chen Luo. Although he has no clear memory of the battle with Chen Luo, looking at the current result, it is obvious that he was defeated by the opponent in the end, and looking at the opponent's unscathed appearance, it is obvious that there are huge amounts of strength between them. Gap. With the blessing of such a strong person, the possibility of being controlled by someone like Stryker like before will be greatly reduced, and he will also be able to have the possibility of a normal life. After thinking about it, there is really no reason to refuse. With this thought in mind, Juggernaut made a decisive decision. Boss, I am willing to join Ba. Chapter 520, Part 1. Time flies so fast, and in the blink of an eye, several months have passed. At noon that day, on Skull Island, under the scorching sun in the sky, violent explosions sounded in a deserted open space somewhere on the island. The surroundings were filled with dust, accompanied by fire from time to time, and the sound was extremely shocking. Wanda, cover me. Good. As soon as she finished speaking, a red light flashed across Wanda's eyes. She waved her hands, and overwhelming red mist emerged from her hands, shrouding the tall figure in front of her. At the same time, around that figure, a figure that was so fast that it was completely invisible was also running very fast. Under Pietro's rapid running, the airflows condensed and formed, forming small tornadoes that surrounded the figure in the center. Countless sand and dust underground were swept into the sky by the tornadoes, and the surrounding area instantly became 603 gray, which made people feel uncomfortable. Can't see what's inside at all. The red mist swept across, instantly covering all the tornadoes created by Pietro, forming a huge amount of red light shield, and then pressed down violently. The internal space suddenly shrank inward, and the tornadoes began to gather and merge under the control of some unknown force, and finally exploded in an instant, forming countless violent airflows wrapped in sand and dust, like a sharp blade made of sand and dust. Traveling around in this limited space, crazily destroying everything around. Naturally, this also includes the figure standing in the center. Bang, bang, bang. Continuous dull crashing sounds sounded, and the moment countless sand blades slashed at Chen Luo, all the energy contained in them was absorbed by Chen Luo. After losing all the energy queens, the sand instantly could not maintain its original form, drifting feebly toward the ground. On the other side, the tornadoes originally created by Pietro gradually dissipated under the absorption of Chen Luo. When the sand and dust completely fell silent, and the surrounding space became clear, the figure was finally revealed in front of everyone. Chen Luo raised his head, looked in the direction of Wanda, and grinned. Then it's my turn. As soon as he finished speaking, the next moment, all the energy that Chen Luo had absorbed surged out and gathered at Chen Luo's feet. Lift your foot and step hard on the ground. Rumble. The ground instantly began to shake violently. Starting from Chen Luo's position, a huge crack visible to the naked eye quickly began to expand and spread, instantly breaking through Wanda's blockade and pressing in her direction. Because the shield created by Wanda just now did not cover all the ground under her feet, Wanda's ability did not block this attack at all. In addition, she is still maintaining the operation of the shield and wants to avoid it. Some are too late and may fall into the depths of the earth at any time and be completely buried. But just when the crack was about to reach Wanda's feet, a strong wind blew by. Pietro arrived in front of Wanda in an instant and then took his sister to a safe place, barely escaping the attack just now. After coming back to her senses, Wanda looked calm. Her eyes flashed red. She clenched her hands hard and activated her ability with all her strength. Under her control, the red mist that originally surrounded Chen Luo changed instantly and quickly gathered towards the center. It looked like countless slender red chains, all of which wrapped around Chen Luo. Do it! Tony's voice rang out from the sky, and the next moment, dozens of micromissiles were fired from his chest, with azure light spots flashing in the center of the missiles, which looked dazzling but also filled with a deadly threat. These missiles are the new elements that Tony created by himself. Infinite elements are used as energy sources, because they are elements that have never been seen in this universe. They also give this new element an ability that other elements do not have. After Tony's research during this period, he was pleasantly surprised to find that using this element as an energy source to create a bomb can effectively break the barrier of divine power, and the resulting explosion can directly act on the body of the demigod, causing direct damage to it. Harm. And because of the characteristics of this element, Chen Luo found that his own energy conversion could not absorb the energy generated by this explosion. Therefore, after developing this method, Tony already had the ability to fight against demigod-level powerhouses. Capital. But this does not mean that Chen Luo has nothing to do with him. Looking at the micro-missiles launched by Tony, Chen Luo's face remained calm. He raised his right foot and stepped hard on the ground. Boom! Under the terrifying force, the ground beneath Chen Luo's feet instantly collapsed and exploded. Countless rubbles were flying. Looking at the rubbles in front of him, Chen Luo took a deep breath and held his chest high. Then it blew forward violently. The strong wind roared past, and the violent airflow was spit out from Chen Luo's mouth, causing the gravel in front to change direction instantly, and countless small afterimages streaked through the air. There were bursts of sharp explosions, and they rushed towards Tony, fly in the direction of the attack. In just a few blinks, the rubble collided with the micro-missiles in front. Violent explosions sounded, and huge fireballs appeared in the air one after another. The shock wave, generated by the powerful explosion, swept across all directions, and white gas visible to the naked eye. The waves spread rapidly, bringing with them strong winds that made everyone's cheeks hurt. Roar! But at this moment, two huge figures close to 3 meters in size instantly broke through the fireball in front, smashing the flames and smoke in front of them, and let out bursts of terrifying roars. With a heavy step under his feet, his body rose into the sky and jumped in the direction of Chen Luo. In midair, Hulk and Juggernaut looked left and right, with ferocious faces, waving huge amounts of fists, roaring loudly, and launched fierce attacks. In the blink of an eye, two figures leaped into the sky above Chen Luo's head. They clasped their hands together and raised them high. The terrifying power gathered in their hands, like a mountain of Tai, crushing everything. Too slow. However, their attack still seemed a bit too slow for Chen Luo. While the two were attacking, they also commented with great interest. The 1.9 action followed. With a thought in his mind, Chen Luo disappeared in the next moment, directly dodging the attacks of the two men. Boom! The attacks of the two people fell and hit the ground below. Under the bombardment of these two terrifying distances, the earth began to tremble again, and the ground collapsed instantly. With the two people as the center, a huge, deep pit with a radius of nearly 100 meters was formed. The ground appears, and when viewed from a high altitude, it looks like it has been hit by a meteorite. It is extremely terrifying. The power is good. Keep up the good work next time. Chen Luo's voice sounded behind the two of them. Upon hearing this, both Hulk and Hulk's expressions changed. However, before they could react, the next moment a huge amount of force instantly acted on them, taking the two of them off the ground, forming a dazzling meteor in the sky, and disappeared in an instant. Chapter 521, Part 1. Plop! Passing thousands of meters in the air, two huge amounts of figures flew past the edge of the island and fell straight into the sea about 100 meters away from the edge. Along with two huge amounts of waves, the two people disappeared in an instant. After Hulk and the two were eliminated in an instant, Chen Luo dodged and appeared on the other side. Although he had used teleportation to avoid the attack, at this moment, the red chain on his body was still firmly sealing his body, and it had not dissipated at all. Sign. Wanda's awakening ability, Origin Magic Power, is also an energy conversion ability that cannot be absorbed. And after nearly half a year of training, Wanda's ability has also gone one step further. Even with Chen Luo's current strength, he would not be able to successfully break free in a short time. The muscles all over his body were tense, and a terrifying force that was enough to penetrate a hill exploded. However, even so, although the chains on his body violently expanded outwards, there was still no sign of dissipating, and they were still tightly wrapped in inside. Feeling the strength of the chain, Chen Luo nodded slightly and said with satisfaction, "Not bad. Wanda, looking at this time, you have made great progress." Looking at the pale girl in front of 09, Chen Luo's eyes flashed. "But it's time to end. Wanda, take a good rest." After saying that, Chen Luo's figure swayed and disappeared instantly. The next moment, when Chen Luo reappeared, he was already behind the opponent. A stream of blood poured out from his body and turned into a bloody palm. The palm turned into a knife and gently touched the back of the opponent's neck. Leave. After just one encounter, Wanda's eyes went dark and she fainted to the ground instantly. As Wanda fell into coma, the red chains that originally tightly bound Chen Luo dissipated in an instant, and she was free again. After moving his body, Chen Luo raised his head and looked at the sky, then looked at Pietro on the other side and chuckled. "Then it's your turn next." "Not good." Pietro's scalp tightened, and without thinking, he moved his feet and his body turned into a long afterimage and disappeared from the place in an instant. After nearly half a year of training, Pietro's ability has also made great progress. Now after starting at full speed, it can already reach about 3 times the speed of sound. The intensity is not much different from that of Chen Luo today. But this is just Chen Luo's normal situation. You must know that Chen Luo still has a passive ability that is not working. Under the influence of the dark favorability, as long as he is in a dark environment, Chen Luo's physical fitness will be doubled, and his speed will reach about 6 times the speed of sound. Compared with Pietro, he is huge. Amounts of difference. Before being promoted to a strong demigod, this ability still depends on the environment, time, and weather. But after becoming a demigod, as long as Chen Luo is willing, he can play anywhere, just like it is now. Looking up at the sky, Chen Luo thought, and the endless blood-colored divine power shot straight into the sky. The next moment, a thick and dazzling blood cloud began to form at a speed visible to the naked eye and spread rapidly around. In just a few breaths, the blood cloud had already covered a 1,000-mile radius. The entire island below was shrouded in this blood cloud in the sky, and no sunlight from above could shine in. The entire island is buried in dark shadows. The color of the world changes with just one thought. This is Chen Luo's current power. After artificially creating this dark battlefield, Chen Luo's passive ability was also activated. When his feet moved, his speed suddenly doubled. At such a rapid speed, all of Pietro's movements came into his sight. "Got you!" A slight voice sounded from behind Pietro. Hearing the voice, Pietro's expression changed, and he was about to change direction to avoid it. However, in the eyes of Chen Luo, his movements were as slow as a snail. "Get some sleep." Chen Luo didn't say anything more, turned his palm into a knife, and gently slashed towards the opponent's neck. Thump! Without any surprise, Pietro's eyes darkened, and he instantly fell into Mengxiang. After doing all this, Chen Luo swayed and returned to the original place. His figure appeared from the air again. He looked up at the figure flying in the sky, shrugged, and said with a smile, "How about it, Tony? Do you want me to do it next?" Hundreds of meters in the sky, a figure covered in steel armor stood quietly, looking at the unconscious Wanda and the 2 Hulk, who were still swimming in the sea, with a look on their faces. He lowered his head helplessly and said, "Okay, you win." Slowly descending from the sky, he came to Chen Luo. The battle suit slowly opened, and Tony walked out of it. He looked at him with displeasure and said, "You guys are really awesome." Not long ago, with the release of the latest generation of Mark armor, with absolute confidence in his work, Tony decisively approached Chen Luo and planned to conduct the 34th test of his armor. However, it was the same as the previous 33 times. This time, he even called on the 2 human shields, Hulk Juggernaut, and Wanda, the 2 mutants who had been training on the island. He was gearing up and confidently planned to give Chen Luo a long-lost experience. Failed, but soon after they actually started fighting, Tony gave up the idea completely. Even if these people joined forces, the last time did not exceed 3 minutes, and the entire army was almost annihilated. It was terrifying, especially the way Chen Luo responded to his attack just now. He could easily kill the attack he originally intended to win with just a breath of air. How could such an exaggerated response method give him the confidence to continue fighting with him? Looking up at the endless blood cloud in the sky, Tony's eyes twitched slightly, and he cursed inwardly. "This monster! No, it seems that my weapons are still not strong enough. I must develop stronger weapons next. I don't believe it. I can't win even once." Thinking of the various scenes in which he challenged Chen Luo over the years, Tony's eyes narrowed, and his initially wavering confidence instantly became extremely firm. With the strong desire to defeat Chen Luo, Tony had all kinds of inspirations in his mind at this moment. About how to develop, he also had vague ideas about the next generation of armor. "Chen, don't be too proud of yourself." Tony came to his senses, raised his eyebrows, and said with confidence, "When my next armor development is completed, I will come back to you to challenge B. Just wait. I will beat you next time." "Ah, yes, yes." Chen Luo nodded repeatedly with a smile on his face, without any intention of refuting. "Huh." Hearing Chen Luo's answer, Tony scratched his head in confusion and looked at Chen Luo with doubts in his eyes. "Why do I feel like something is wrong?" "You're thinking too much." Chen Luo shook his head and calmly changed the subject. "By the way, Tony, didn't you come to me today for something else? Tell me, what's the matter?" Hearing this, Tony finally remembered and said quickly, "By the way, Chen, I came to you this time because I need your help with something." Chapter 522, Part 1. "Oh." Chen Luo raised his eyebrows with interest and asked, "What are you busy with? Tell me, is such that?" Tony calmed down and then told Chen Luo what happened. In fact, what Tony wanted to ask Chen Luo for help was very simple. A few days ago, the famous New York billionaire Victor Von Doom suddenly announced a plan. Just 2 weeks later, he will launch a rocket into outer space, approaching a once-in-a-century cosmic storm 50,000 kilometers away from the Earth, to sample and study the cosmic storm. The reason for doing this, according to Doom's claim, is to decipher the secrets of human genetic genes. As long as enough data can be obtained from the cosmic storm, corresponding solutions can be found for various terminal diseases in humans in the future. After hearing the news, Tony seemed a little dismissive, thinking that it was not feasible at all. As for finding a way to decipher human genetic genes from studying cosmic storm data, it was even more fanciful. But when he heard the name of the man who proposed the plan, Tony suddenly changed his mind. This person is none other than one of the future Fantastic Four, Richard Reed. He is also one of the few super geniuses in the world today who can compare with Tony. Tony will naturally give a proposal to a genius of this level. Pay corresponding attention. Because he was curious about the other party's research, Tony also suddenly became interested. He wanted to occupy a place to go to the cosmic storm and sent people to go to the destination with Reed and others to collect data. But when he asked people to go to discuss with Doom, to his surprise, Doom chose to refuse. Hearing the other party's reply made Tony even more interested. In fact, he was only slightly interested in this research at first. Maybe he would give up when the interest wore off. But it would be different if the other party refused. Perhaps it was out of the arrogance of a super genius, which made Tony even more willing to join in. However, he had just moved the company's headquarters to New York and had no connections here. It's not as broad as Los Angeles. If you want to convince Doom to allow him to join, you have to find a group controller with a very powerful position in New York. And for this, who in New York can compare to the Chen Luo family, who is worth billions and rules the underground forces in New York? Tony is confident that with his friendship with Chen Luo, this small favor will definitely not be a problem. Sure enough, after hearing what Tony needed his help for, Chen Luo did not choose to refuse and immediately nodded and agreed. This is no problem. I'll tell you when I get back, and he will come forward to communicate with Dr. Doom. That would be great. Tony also knew Kraven's ability very well, so if he contacted him in his identity, there was no possibility of rejection in Doom. So Tony felt a lot more relieved at the moment. After discussing the matter, within a few minutes, the ground rumbled, and accompanied by two huge beams of smoke and dust that looked like long dragons, the two finally rushed back to their original place from the sea. At the same time, Wanda and Pietro gradually woke up, opened their eyes, and regained consciousness. Seeing that everyone had gathered, Chen Luo glanced at Hulk Juggernaut first, nodded, and without saying anything else, he waved his hands casually and let the two of them leave. Upon seeing this, Hulk's face suddenly became happy, and he quickly turned around and ran towards the other direction with Juggernaut, looking a little impatient. Chen Luo. He definitely knew why Hulk was running so fast. After his home in New York was destroyed in the war, Hulk came to live on Skull Island, no longer having to be dragged by Peter to study in the past. And after discussing the time allocation with Banner, Hulk can be regarded as freeing himself. Perhaps because his mind is still at the level of a teenager, Hulk now has an extraordinary love for games. In addition, he does not need to consider the food and daily life here. As time goes by, Hulk is even too lazy to go out. Stay in the room all day, immersed in the game world. Seeing Hulk gradually turning into a dead house, Chen Luo was also anxious, so after conquering Juggernaut, Chen Luo suddenly had the idea of letting him live next door to Hulk so that this big guy would exist. Maybe he can get Hulk back on his feet. After Juggernaut arrived, Hulk turned out to be quite hostile to Juggernaut, as he thought. Within a month after that, the two had to fight every 3 days to vent their anger, although in the end, both it's a no-win situation. But this situation has gradually changed over time. Maybe it was because he found that fighting every day was not interesting, or maybe it was because the two big guys strengthened their relationship during the fight. Hulk no longer had the initial hostility towards Juggernaut, especially after discovering Juggernaut's superior game, level 1 time. Hulk suddenly turned on him, generated huge amounts of goodwill. Needless to say, there was no need to say much about the subsequent development. After discovering that the other party had a common hobby of gaming, the relationship between the two improved by leaps and bounds. They stayed in the room and played games every day. Thanks to their inhuman physiques, they sometimes got excited and went without eating or drinking for 10 days, immersing themselves in the game world. In the end, they were discovered by Chen Luo, who came here to visit them and drag them out. Then it finally stopped. After discovering that both of them were heading towards death, Chen Luo finally paid attention to it. In order to keep their fighting level from declining, Chen Luo even asked them to train with them every once in a while. One day, we can help them get out of the sea of suffering. But judging from the current situation, his good intentions obviously did not attract the attention of the two of them. Thinking of this, Chen Luo let out a long sigh. But now he can see it. Hulk and the others do not actually need to rely on training to maintain their strength. Zhao Zhao, plus the two people's physiques, playing games properly will not be enough for them. What harm is caused? In addition, having games as an outlet is not a bad thing for Hulk to control his temper. So gradually, Chen Luo adopted a free-spirited attitude and let them maintain a certain amount of training every once in a while. Don't worry about them anymore. But it's different for Wanda and the others. Precisely because he understood the terrifying potential of their abilities, Chen Luo also put a lot of effort into cultivating them. Not only did he personally come on stage every once in a while as a sparring partner for the two of them, but he also specially found relevant researchers to teach them based on their ability. The purpose was to develop their conscious thinking and make their ability more flexible. It can be adapted to different combat scenarios. In the end, under his careful training, Chen Luo was very pleased with the progress they made. Chapter 523, Part 1. The first is Wanda. As time goes by, her abilities become more and more powerful. In less than half a year, Wanda's strength has skyrocketed, and now she has directly reached the extraordinary level. Relying on the power of origin magic power, Wanda's current ability poses a certain threat even to existences at the demigod level. If Chen Luo makes a comparison, Wanda's strength now is already as strong as when he fought Apocalypse. The strength is the same, considering that she is only in her early 20s and that she has made such progress in such a short period of time. There is still a huge amount of gap between Chen Luo and Chen Luo back then. If it weren't for systematic help, even if he was given more time, his strength might not reach Wanda's current level. After gaining a deeper understanding of Wanda's potential, Chen Luo became more and more concerned about her training. During this period, he would take time out almost every once in a while to check the training progress of the two of them, hoping to cultivate a true demigod as quickly as possible. If Wanda and Wanda can grow into demigods, then they will have more confidence in facing the next war that will affect the entire universe. Fortunately, Wang 587's progress has not failed to live up to his painstaking training. In the past 6 months, she has spent almost every day in training. Even if Chen Luo doesn't take the initiative to look for her, she will take the initiative to come to him and want to let Chen Luo help her train. Therefore, in the past 6 months after the success of Awakening, Wanda spent most of her time on Skull Island without any distractions. This is why she was able to achieve such exaggerated progress in a short period of time. Compared with Wanda's progress, although Pietro's progress is not bad and has reached the level of surface level, 3rd level mutant, such progress undoubtedly makes Chen Luo a little disappointed. Although Pietro's ability seems to be a simple super speed movement, it is just simply fast. Referring to a man in the next universe who claims to be the fastest in the world, when the speed reaches a certain limit, the power he can exert is far beyond that. The imagination of ordinary people. Through ultra-high frequency vibration, the body can pass through the defenses of most objects in the world, thereby achieving an effect similar to walking through a wall. If only a certain part of the body is controlled to vibrate, it can be turned into an extremely sharp blade. Kill people instantly, under the ability of ultra-high frequency vibration. Even Chen Luo and even Hulk's bodies are unable to defend against such an attack. And this is only part of the application of this ability. It is not impossible to create artificial tornadoes, walk on water, and even travel through time. Although the universe next door can do this because of the cheat-like ability of the Speed Force, who can guarantee that when Pietro's speed reaches the limit, or even exceeds the speed of light, he will not be able to travel through time. Matter? So Chen Luo also has great hopes for Pietro. But unlike his sister, although Pietro worked hard in training, he was still far behind his sister. Originally, there was a gap in ability between the two. Now, coupled with the acquired achievements, progress, this also caused the two people to further expand their strength, and in the end, they were completely thrown away by Wanda. Thinking of this, Chen Luo couldn't help but glare at the other party and said in a deep voice, "Pietro, it seems that you have been lazy again during this period. From now on, cut the time you play games in half and give me all your attention on training. When you can surpass me in speed, I will give you 10 million as a reward." Award. Originally, after hearing the first half of Chen Luo's sentence, Pietro's face darkened, and he lowered his head feebly, looking a little listless. But when he heard the second half of Chen Luo's sentence, Pietro instantly became energetic and his eyes shone. For fear of Chen Luo, seemed to regret it and quickly nodded in agreement. "Chen, you can't go back on your word. If I can really surpass you in speed, will you really give me a reward?" At this moment, he has begun to wonder in his mind, if he can get so much money, how many toys and games can he buy, especially the Rabbit Kingdom Cultivation online game that he has recently become obsessed with. There are so many game equipment there that he is very greedy. If he had enough money, wouldn't he be able to achieve the achievement of room service? Thinking of this, Pietro suddenly became energetic and full of motivation. "That's definitely." Chen Luo rolled his eyes. "When have I ever lied to you? But I agreed in advance that I will only give you half a year at most. If you still can't do it, then the reward will be invalid. Do you understand?" Hearing this, Pietro's expression tightened, and he nodded heavily. "Then I'll go train first." It has to be said that under the temptation of huge amounts of money, Pietro's enthusiasm for training instantly skyrocketed. He didn't even have time to say a few more words. He moved his feet and instantly turned into a gust of wind and dissipated in place. Seeing the other party's disappearing figure, Chen Luo turned around and looked at Wanda. His eyes suddenly softened a lot. Wanda, you worked very hard. You don't have to work so hard during this period of time. Just rest for a while. I'll give it to you. You take a vacation. Having said this, Chen Luo took out a black credit card from his pocket and handed it over. Take this card. If you want to buy anything in the future, just swipe this card. I think the money in it should be enough for you. Used. Wanda's big jewel-like eyes looked straight at Chen Luo. She chose to ignore the unlimited credit card in Chen Luo's hand and said softly, I don't need this, but can I mention another one? A request. Huh? What's the request? Looking at the other party's expectant expression, Chen Luo's heart suddenly jumped and he subconsciously asked, I heard from Peter that your cooking is delicious. I want to eat dinner cooked by you yourself. After saying what was in her heart, Wanda plucked up her courage. A slight blush appeared on her cheeks, and she looked at Chen Luo unblinkingly. Facing the other party's gaze, Chen Luo suddenly fell into silence, not knowing what to say for a moment. Ahem. Just as the atmosphere suddenly became anxious, Tony suddenly coughed and finally said, Well, Chen, since you have something else to do here, I won't bother you. See you next time. Just kidding. Judging from Tony's many years of love affairs, he knows the current situation very well. As for how to deal with it, his experience does not apply to Chen Luo. After all, he also knew something about Chen Luo's situation. You'd better wish for yourself? Tony sighed secretly in his heart, and then Tony quickly entered the armor. As the armor quickly closed, dazzling flames spurted out from the ends of his limbs, soared into the sky, and disappeared in an instant. This unloyal guy. Seeing the figure flying into the sky, Chen Luo cursed secretly, then turned his head with a headache and looked at Wanda. He was silent for a long time, and then finally spoke. There are not many kinds of ingredients here. It seems that today's dinner may be a little simpler. Wanda's eyes sparkled. She nodded heavily, and a smile appeared on her face. Then I'll help too. Chapter 524, Part 1. The next day in Queens, New York, after sending May and Peter out as usual, Chen Luo came to the balcony in front of him, looked into the distance, and was lost in thought. Not surprisingly, after the dinner last night, the relationship between Chen Luo and Wanda seemed to have broken through a certain boundary. However, in the face of Wanda's implicit hint last night, Chen Luo chose to leave without making any further changes. Further plans. As for why he did this, he also had his own concerns. It was impossible for him not to see Wanda's feelings for him for such a long time. But Chen Luo knew very well that the other party's feelings for him were mostly based on admiration. After all, he changed Wanda's life, not only giving her the power to take revenge, but also getting her life back on track. Under the influence of various factors, Wanda may have mistaken this kind of admiration for love, and thus choosing to turn a blind eye to Chen Luo's other circumstances. But with Wanda's character, is she really willing to share Chen Rong's feelings with other people? Chen Luo can't guarantee this. It was because of such concerns that Chen Luo did not choose to go further last night. Instead, he seriously told the other party about his situation and asked the other party to think carefully before making a decision, and then chose to leave. However, it can be expected that Wanda's choice may not be decided in a short time. So Chen Luo didn't plan to look for her again until the other party thought about it clearly. Thinking of this, Chen Luo let out a long sigh, shook his head, stopped thinking about it, cheered up, turned around, opened the door, and walked out. In the secret laboratory on Skull Island, as the air rippled, Chen Luo's figure slowly emerged from it. Looking at the busy figure in front of him, Chen Luo stepped forward and asked, Banner, how is the experiment going? Hearing Chen Luo's voice, Banner turned around with a smile on his face and nodded slowly in response. Not bad. According to my calculations, there should be results in less than a year. Due to the impact of the New York War half a year ago, the Edgewood building was destroyed by the powerful Chitauri demigods. As a result, Banner's clone experiment that was going smoothly came to an abrupt end, and all the experimental data were destroyed. Although he was very helpless about this, but he can only choose to start over. Fortunately, with previous experience, this time the clone experiment is progressing very quickly. Banner's body cells have been successfully extracted and differentiated into primitive embryonic stem cells. Next, we only need to inject nutrients into them step by step, then just wait for it to grow up, thinking that it won't be long before he can really say goodbye to Hulk and regain his freedom. During this time, the smile on Banner's face has never faded. He is full of energy and wishes he could live in the laboratory all day long, waiting for clones. Cultivation is complete. But he and Hulk had already reached an agreement, and each of them could spend half of their time. So apart from conducting experiments in the laboratory, Banner spent most of the rest of his time in games. Although Banner has some headaches about Hulk's hobby, deep down in his heart, he feels that this result is more acceptable to him. After all, compared to a monster that can destroy anytime and anywhere whenever it appears, Banner would rather the other party be a gamer. As long as the other party can be prevented from getting into trouble, Banner is in favor of whatever the other party likes to do. Is that so? Then Banner, please do your work first. If you need anything, just let me know. After briefly chatting with the other party, Chen Luo turned around and left. Arriving at the training ground, Chen Luo nodded with satisfaction as he looked at the figure running like lightning in the field, and his figure gradually disappeared into the air. In a huge villa in the base, Wanda looked out the window, motionless, her crystal-like eyes sparkling, and the sunlight reflected through the window on her pure face, adding a bit of brilliance to it. Looks extremely charming. Wanda looked at the sky outside the window, looking like she was thinking about something. Suddenly, Wanda seemed to feel something. She blinked her eyelashes and subconsciously looked somewhere outside the window. However, when she looked there was nothing there. Only a lone big tree, standing with a straight trunk and lush green branches and leaves swaying in the wind. Huh? Is it an illusion? Wanda blinked, and her heart skipped a beat. A tiny trace of red mist instantly poured out of the window, came near the big tree, swam around the tree several times, and finally sank into Wanda's body. As if she felt something, the corners of Wanda's eyes gradually curved, and a faint smile appeared on her face. Back to New York. Chen Luo kept moving until he came to a building that was about 100 meters high, and then walked quickly towards the gate. 0. Please give me flowers. 0. As the Chen Luo group's headquarters was destroyed during the New York War, after discussing with Tony, the two of them decided to join forces and buy a piece of land in Manhattan, and then move the entire group headquarters here to build an industrial park of huge amounts. After about half a year of construction, finally, not long ago, the construction of the headquarters of the two major groups was completed. However, because there are other supporting buildings that have not been completed, this park is not open to other employees of the group for the time being. Nowadays, those who can enter the headquarters are well-deserved elite personnel of the two major groups. The group relies on the ability of these people to operate smoothly. What Chen Luo just entered was the headquarters of the Chen Luo group in this park, the new Edgewood building. 0. Go all the way up to the top floor of the building, quickly arrive in front of Craven's office, and push the door open. Master Chen Luo. Seeing the person coming, Craven quickly stood up from his chair and said respectfully, Craven, how's the gravity? Did Dr. Doom accept the flower? Craven's face froze, and he hesitated to speak. What's wrong? Is there something wrong? Craven nodded and said quickly, That's it. I had already approached Dr. Doom, and he had agreed, but then Dr. Reed didn't know what he talked to Tony about, and in the end Tony gave up on it. Idea, and have not decided to continue participating. Chen Luo frowned slightly, not understanding what happened to Tony. After waving his hands and saying goodbye to the other party, Chen Luo immediately decided to go and ask Tony in person. Because the two headquarters were very close to each other, it took Chen Luo less than 5 minutes in total to reach the top floor of the Stark building, where Tony usually lives in the apartment. Tony, *T. Which bastard is that? Chen Luo knocked on the door. But to his surprise, a familiar exclamation came from the room. Not long after, the door opened and Tony appeared in front of Chen Luo with a dark face. Chen, what do you want from me? If nothing else, I'll get busy first. After hearing this and looking at the messy clothes on the other party's body, Chen Luo suddenly understood, and a different kind of smile appeared on his face. Chapter 5:25, Part 1. Tony, what are you doing? Is this worthy of Pepper? Chen Luo had a serious face and looked at Tony with eyes full of contempt. FB. Chen, what the hell are you doing? The facts are in front of you. How dare you quibble? Chen Luo looked at the other person up and down, patted Tony's shoulder hard, and spoke in a very heavy tone. Tony, you are no longer young now. It's time to calm down. Listen to me. You should live well with Pepper. As for the other beauties, leave it to me to take care of you. Don't worry, I will definitely treat them well. What the few *K? Tony tilted his head and looked at the guy in front of him. He immediately understood and looked at Chen Luo with eyes full of contempt. I said, you guy, don't you think I was doing something to blame for 723 talking about Pepper? Hearing Tony's answer, Chen Luo's eyes widened and he couldn't believe it. Tony, you're such a tough talker. The facts are right in front of you, and you're still trying to quibble with me? What's the truth? Which of your eyes saw me looking for other beauties? Tony rolled his eyes wildly, not taking Chen Luo's words to heart at all. It seems that you stopped crying after seeing the coffin. Chen Luo snorted coldly, past the other person, and strode towards the room. Then let me see besides you, who else is staying in this room right now? Pepper? However, when Chen Luo came to Tony's bedroom and saw the familiar figure in the room, Chen Luo's mouth suddenly opened wide with disbelief on his face. No, that person just now was you. With Tony just stalling for time, Pepper has now finished dressing again, got off the bed, and looked at Chen Luo angrily. What do you think? Chen Luo looked embarrassed, scratched his head, and laughed. So that's it? It seems that I have disturbed you. Sorry, I'm leaving now. With that said, Chen Luo quickly turned around and planned to leave. Etc. Tony stretched out his hand to stop the other party and said helplessly, "What's the use of talking about this now? Do you think we are still in the mood now? Okay, what do you want from me? Just tell me." Pepper walked out of the room, although she was very angry at Chen Luo's sudden arrival. After hearing what Chen Luo said just now, her anger immediately disappeared a lot. She went to the kitchen and made a cup of hot water. The tea was handed to Chen, Luo, and Tony respectively. Knowing that the two of them had something to talk about, after finishing all this, Pepper didn't stay any longer and turned around to leave. Chen Luo was the only two people left in the room. At this time, Chen Luo finally came out of the embarrassment. Then he looked at Tony curiously and asked why he gave up participating in Doom's outer space project. "So that's what you said." Tony suddenly realized, picked up the hot tea on the table, took a sip, and then said, "Actually, it's nothing. You should have gotten the news. Yesterday, Reed came to see me. After he knew that I was interested in this plan, he thought he could let me participate in the investment, so he told me the details of the plan." Having said this, Tony paused and shrugged, but after seeing his plan information, I felt that the plan was not as interesting as I thought, so I simply gave up. Hearing this unexpected answer, Chen Luo was stunned for a moment, then nodded clearly, and instantly regained his composure. This kind of huge project with an investment of hundreds of millions, and a project initiated by Reed, a genius recognized by the scientific community, would be completely impossible for ordinary people to refuse. But for Tony, who is also a super genius, unless it is a project that he is interested in, he will not take another look at it. Just like he has let others go a lot of times before. So in Chen, after Luo reacted, it didn't seem strange anymore. "You're so willful, Tony." Chen Luo shook his head and looked at Tony with a mysterious smile on his face. "I hope you won't regret it. Maybe the results of this project will be beyond your expectations." "What does that have to do with me?" Tony shrugged indifferently. "I have no interest in this project anyway, and I wouldn't be surprised if they can actually achieve some interesting research results. After all, Dr. Reed still has some abilities, although there is still a certain gap compared to a super genius like me." Seeing this, Chen Luo shook his head helplessly. "Since you have made a decision, then just be happy." With that said, Chen Luo stood up slowly and planned to leave. "Chen." Seeing Chen Luo's actions, Tony raised his eyebrows and spoke again. "What's up, Chen? How is the relationship between you and Wanda going?" Chen Luo. Lowering his head and looking at Tony's gossipy eyes, Chen Luo's face darkened, and he said, "You don't need to worry about it." Then he used his teleportation ability and disappeared in an instant. Looking at the position where Chen Luo disappeared, Tony smacked his lips in regret. After thinking about it, in order to prevent being beaten, he decisively stopped gossiping. "Let's get back to work." With the goal of Chen Luo in front of him, and with the belief that he would defeat Chen Luo once, Tony's enthusiasm for work has not diminished at all during this period. Countless inspirations burst out in his brain. He stretched, and then turned around and headed towards the laboratory. "Chen, wait for me, you guy. Sooner or later, I will beat you." Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was 2 weeks later. On this day, Chen Luo was still as usual. After the date with Mavis, he hurried home and prepared dinner for Peter and the others. However, he was just about to make a move when the next moment a phone rang. "Which one?" "Chen, we need your help." Fury's voice sounded on the other end of the phone. Hearing this, Chen Luo hesitated. "What's heavy?" "It's Reed and the others. Something happened to them." Immediately afterwards, Fury told Chen Luo what happened. It turned out that 3 days ago, with the launch of the rocket from the NASA base, Doom, Reed and his team finally embarked on a journey to outer space. Everything was going smoothly originally. Through the influence from Space Reed and the others, the rocket was gradually flying towards the direction of the cosmic storm according to its original trajectory. However, when the rocket came near the cosmic storm, Reed and the others followed the original plan, walked out of the hatch, and took out instruments to measure the cosmic storm. Suddenly, the storm became extremely violent and turned into a dazzling golden beam. The red storm enveloped everyone in an instant before Reed and the others could react. At the same moment, with the sudden outbreak of the cosmic storm, the communication equipment on the rocket was also destroyed. In addition, the storm was raging nonstop. At this time, with the current technology of the Earth, it was impossible to get close to the center of the storm to rescue Reed and the others. So at this time, out of desperation, Fury turned his attention to the Avengers.
Thanks for watching. You can find the next videos in the playlist linked in the info card or directly on my channel. With the series coming to an end, now's the perfect time to share your suggestions for the next one. Just drop the name of the novel and the website it's on in the comments. I'd love to hear your ideas. And as always, if you have any feedback, feel free to share it in the comments too.